Some courtroom sentences are so insane, they leave everyone in the room speechless. We're talking life in prison for stealing socks, forced public humiliation, and punishments that feel more like revenge than justice. These aren't just legal rulings, they're emotional wrecking balls that shattered lives, and one of them nearly caused a riot.
Never in 23 years approximately ever not accepted a sentence.
On the evening of October 4th, 2016, 17-year-old Dante Wright and two friends set out to rob fellow student Jordan Klee outside Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The trio spotted Klee talking on his phone in a parking lot. Wright, armed with a 9mm handgun, demanded Klee's phone and wallet. When Klee hesitated, Wright shot him in the back of the head, killing him instantly and sending his body sprawling onto the asphalt. Jordan, a senior and promising athlete, had no chance to defend himself before collapsing, where classmates found him moments later. Investigators quickly zeroed in on Wright. Cell tower pings placed his phone at the scene, and surveillance footage showed him lurking nearby. Forensic ballistics later confirmed the shell casing matched Wright's seized handgun. Detectives also discovered a torn journal page in Wright's backpack, boasting of a big payday just hours before the attack. Within 48 hours, police arrested all three suspects, shocking a community unprepared for such teenage violence. The brutal slaying of Jordan Klee, a student with college prospects and a loyal friend, tore through Ann Arbor's tight-knit school community. Pickets of flowers and lit candles gathered around the parking lot memorial, and classmates held vigils, mourning a life ended far too soon. The courtroom brimmed with tension when the sentencing hearing began in mid-2017 before Judge David Swartz. As Klee's family members delivered victim impact statements, Wright sat with a smirk, sometimes chuckling under his breath. Each tear-stained photo of Jordan drawn from his parents' arms seemed only to amuse Wright. Prosecutor Michael Leitch paused the proceedings, turning to Wright and scolding, "Your behavior is chilling, and if you can't show respect, we'll revisit this plea." After a brief recess, Wright's defense attorney apologized, citing his client's immaturity and a habit of masking fear with a grin. Yet Wright leaned toward his lawyer, quietly cracking a joke that drew gasps from the gallery. Former classmates, some in band uniforms, sat in shocked silence, their stares ripping through the courtroom as security gently guided Wright back into his seat. Despite the uproar, Klee's family urged the court to honor the plea and avoid a long retrial. On July 24, 2017, Wright formally pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, armed robbery, and conspiracy. Under Michigan law, he received concurrent 23 to 50-year terms, the minimum under his agreement. Judge Swartz acknowledged that without the deal, he could have imposed life without parole, but deferred to the family's wish to spare them further trauma. Wright entered Michigan's corrections system with an earliest possible release date in 2042. Prison records show him assigned to a medium security facility, reflecting both his age at offense and his disruptive courthouse demeanor. In 2018, his attorneys appealed, arguing the judge had not adequately warned him about losing the plea if he misbehaved. The Michigan Court of Appeals upheld the sentence. We biker, in a soundness, citing the clear terms of the agreement. In the wake of the tragedy, Jordan Klee's parents launched Run for Jordan, an annual 5K scholarship race that draws thousands. The family also lobbied for stricter gun storage laws, sharing how Wright's easy access to a loaded firearm made this nightmare possible. Meanwhile, Wright's case remains a sobering example. A teenager's brutal choice, a plea saved only by the grace of a grieving family, and a life sentence that leaves a community forever changed.
You'll be required to pay court cost fees and assessments in the amount of $431.50.
On March 19, 2023, 14-year-old Carly Madison Gregg used her mother's .357 Magnum to kill her in their home in Brandon, Mississippi. Carly had been arguing with her mother, Ashley Smiley, over discipline and phone use. That afternoon, Ashley, who taught high school math, searched Carly's room and found vape pens she'd hidden. Tensions flared, and later that evening, Carly retrieved the gun, entered her mother's bedroom, and fired 3 shots into her face and chest. After killing Ashley, Carly texted her stepfather, Heath Smiley, asking when he'd be home. As he arrived, she opened fire again, grazing his arm. Then she calmly invited a friend over to see the body. asking if she was squeamish around dead things. Police arrested Carly about half a mile away. Investigators found home security footage showing Carly moving through the house with the gun, and the 911 call her stepfather made, sobbing and frantic, became a key piece of evidence. Prosecutors charged her as an adult with first-degree murder, attempted murder, and tampering with evidence, arguing that she planned the attack and showed cool, calculated brutality. When the jury returned its guilty verdict on September 20th, 2024, Carly Gregg burst into tears, trembling as the judge read each count. Cameras caught her sobbing, shoulders shaking, eyes red and puffy. As the court replayed the stepfather's 911 call, his voice cracking, "She shot her mother." Carly hid her face in her hands, her cries mixing with the raw grief in the gallery. During victim impact statements, Heath Smiley fought back tears, telling Carly, "You destroyed our lives. My wife was everything to us." The judge paused, allowing his words to hang in the silence. Ashley's sister then spoke, her voice quivering. "She was a beacon of love. You took that away forever." Each statement drew fresh tears from Carly, though some jurors and witnesses noted her regret seemed to arrive only once the cameras rolled. A defense psychiatrist had testified Carly was in a mental health crisis, hearing voices and battling severe depression, but the family's anguish overshadowed those claims. Rejecting a 40-year plea deal, a Rankin County jury sentenced Carly Gregg to life without parole on September 23, 2024, plus 10 years for evidence tampering. Judge Dewey Arthur called her actions evil and noted that mental health struggles did not excuse a premeditated ambush of her mother. Carly's case ignited debate in Brandon and beyond. Some argued she needed treatment, not just prison. Others demanded harsher juvenile sentences for violent teens. Advocates pressed for better mental health screening in schools, while parenting groups warned of the dangers of keeping loaded guns within teens' reach. Meanwhile, Heath Smiley launched the Ashley Smiley Foundation, raising funds for grief counseling and gun safety locks in Mississippi homes. Carly Gregg's trial remains an example of teenage violence, mental health crises pushed to the brink, and a community grappling with how to protect its children, both victims and perpetrators.
Her screams were most likely stifled by her own suffocating lungs.
On Mother's Day, May 9th, 2021, 14-year-old Aiden Fucci lured his 13-year-old classmate, Tristan Bailey, to a trail in the Durbin Crossing neighborhood of St. Johns County, Florida. Tristan, a popular cheerleader, was last seen on surveillance video walking with Fucci just before dawn. Later that morning, her body was found in a wooded area, stabbed 114 times. Investigators traced bloody footprints and a missing knife tip to Fucci's home. Inside his room, they recovered a sheath matching the knife, and in the bathroom sink, what his mother admitted was an attempt to scrub justice from evidence. A subsequent confession revealed chilling premeditation. Fucci had told friends he wanted to kill someone by dragging them into the woods. The brutality shocked Florida and the nation. Parents grappled with how a 14-year-old could carry out such a callous killing. Schoolmates held vigils for Tristan, leaving flowers and tokens at Patriot Oaks Academy, her middle school. The community demanded answers and protection from hidden dangers among its youth. At Fucci's sentencing hearing in March 2023, cameras captured the moment Judge R. Lee Smith pronounced the mandatory life term. Fucci's eyes went wide, his mouth falling open in silent shock. For a heartbeat, he seemed frozen, hair falling into his face, before he slumped in his seat staring at the floor. Local reporters said no words were needed. His expression said it all. Tristan's mother, Stacy Bailey, spoke through tears. "My daughter trusted you. You destroyed her life." Each time she paused to collect herself, Fucci glanced up as if witnessing the human cost for the first time. The courtroom remained hushed, except for muffled sobs. When Fucci finally spoke, he whispered, "I'm sorry," barely audible. But any hope of leniency vanished when Tristan's father, Forrest Bailey, addressed the court. "You took my little girl. You must live with that every day." His words echoed long after the gavel fell. Under Florida law, Fucci faced life with review eligibility after 25 years, a term the judge said reflects the horror of 114 wounds. On March 24, 2023, Fucci was officially sentenced to life imprisonment. He is serving his term at Cross City Correctional Institution. 1 year later, his mother, Crystal Smith, pleaded no contest to evidence tampering, cleaning blood from his jeans, and was sentenced to 30 days in jail and 5 years of probation. Meanwhile, the Bailey family established the TB Strong Foundation, offering scholarships and self-defense workshops in Tristan's name, and successfully lobbied Florida to shield minors' crime scene photos from public release. Today, Tristan's memory lives on in annual TB Strong events, reminding the community of the bravery a 13-year-old showed in life and the justice a killer faced for a crime that stunned an entire state.
It was completely defenseless. That's a given. But there were other dynamics at work.
In March 2013, 16-year-old Dylan Shoemaker was left alone to babysit his girlfriend's 23-month-old son, Austin, in Springville, New York. Austin had been crying and fussy, and Dylan admitted later that he felt frustration build. Instead of calling for help, he lashed out. Neighbors heard loud bangs and hurried to the house, finding Austin unresponsive on the living room floor. He was rushed to a nearby hospital but died hours later. Doctors found severe head trauma, multiple skull fractures, and internal bleeding consistent with repeated blows. Autopsy reports described injuries far beyond what could happen in a simple fall. Police arrested Dylan at school the next day. He told officers he just snapped and claimed he didn't mean to kill the child. Investigators uncovered a recorded jail call in which Dylan bragged to his mother, "I'm a 16-year-old kid. You cry in front of the jury and they'll let you off." That recording surfaced at trial, revealing a chilling calculation beneath his earlier remorse. At Dylan's sentencing hearing before Judge William Baller, the courtroom was packed with family members, neighbors, and news crews. As the judge reviewed the charges, Dylan sat with his head bowed. When it came time for victim impact statements, Austin's grandmother, clutching a photo of the toddler, spoke through tears about the emptiness she felt without her only grandson. Dylan rose to speak. With tears running down his face, he turned toward the judge and said, "I give my life for Austin. I'd do anything to bring him back." His voice cracked as he spoke, shoulders shaking. Some in the gallery gasped. His plea sounded heartfelt, but others remembered the jail call. Judge Baller paused, looking down at Dylan. He said firmly, "Your words cannot erase what you did. Your actions show a dangerous anger you chose to unleash on an innocent child." When the judge sternly reminded Dylan of the jail recording brag, Dylan's face went pale. He sank into his chair, hands covering his eyes. The stark contrast between his pleading apology and his earlier boasts made the moment haunting. A young man torn between real grief and having once tried to manipulate sympathy. Judge Bowler sentenced Dylan Shoemaker to 25 years to life in prison, the maximum for second-degree murder under New York law. The judge said he wanted to send a clear message. No child should ever face such violence at the hands of a caregiver. Outside the courthouse, Austin's family spoke of heartbreak and relief. His aunt held a small teddy bear and said, "We can't bring Austin back, but we knew he needed justice." The family started the Austin's Angels Foundation to raise awareness about safe caregiving and to train neighbors in spotting signs of child abuse. Springville schools added workshops on anger management and stress for teens given caregiving roles. Local shelters began offering emergency babysitting for overwhelmed young caregivers. Child safety advocates pointed to Dylan's case as proof that even a moment of uncontrolled rage can have lifelong consequences for victims, families, and perpetrators. Inside the prison system, Dylan entered a program for habitual offenders under 18 with mental health counseling and anger management classes. He will not be eligible for parole until he serves at least 25 years, making him almost 42 before he can ask a board to review his case. The community still whispers of that day in 2013 when a teen's anger ended a toddler's life and changed countless futures forever. Days after turning 18, in June 2006, Dexter Darnell Johnson joined 4 friends on a violent crime spree in Harris County, Texas. The group carjacked Maria Aparice and 17-year-old Hui Ngo at a gas station. They ordered the pair into the back seat, drove them to a remote spot, and robbed them. One victim was forced out of the car and stabbed to death. The others were marched into nearby woods where both Maria and Hai were shot in the head. Investigators later found their bodies hidden under brush. Evidence linked Johnson to the murders. Shell casings matched his handgun, and his DNA was on a bloody cloth. Surveillance video from the gas station captured the group's getaway car. When police arrested him, Johnson showed no visible remorse. He told detectives, "I needed the cash, and if they tried to fight back, I had to do what I did." At Johnson's 2007 sentencing hearing, the packed courtroom fell silent as Judge Denise Collins read the charge: capital murder, punishable by death. When the judge pronounced the death penalty, Johnson erupted. He shouted a string of curses, slammed his fists on the defense table, and screamed, "I'm not going to die." Court officers quickly moved to restrain him as the gallery gasped. Security camera footage captured the chaos. Johnson's face red with rage, lawyers stepping back, and stunned family members in the audience. One of the victim's relatives cried out, "That's all I needed to see," as if Johnson's outburst confirmed his guilt beyond the verdict. The judge paused sentencing for a moment, then ordered Johnson removed. The remainder of the hearing continued without him, the gavel's knock echoing through the empty room. Outside, reporters called it pandemonium in court, and the clip spread across news stations. Some legal experts said Johnson's reaction made a death sentence inevitable, proving he lacked remorse. Others argued his explosive response was a sign of fear, not defiance, a final raw moment before facing the ultimate punishment. Convicted of capital murder, Johnson received a death sentence in 2007. He was sent to the Polinsky Unit, Texas's death row facility. In November 2018, 3 days before a scheduled execution, a federal judge granted a stay to review claims of ineffective counsel, arguing his lawyers failed to present key evidence of his troubled childhood. 4 months later, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals granted a second stay to examine questions about Johnson's intellectual capacity and whether executing him would violate the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel punishment. His attorneys say he has an IQ under 75 and major learning disabilities. Prosecutors call those claims desperate delays. Over a decade after his conviction, Johnson remains on death row, continuing appeals through state and federal courts. Victims' families have spoken at hearings, sometimes arguing for execution, other times urging mercy in light of his age at the time of the crime. The case highlights the tension between harsh justice for brutal crimes and legal protections for those with mental disability claims. As of today, Dexter Johnson's execution date remains unset. His saga serves as an example of a teenager whose first adult steps led to the electric chair, but whose legal battle over mind and guilt may be his longest sentence of all. On July 6, 2012, 16-year-old Rachel Schoaf and her 15-year-old friend, Shelia Eddy, lured their classmate Skylar Neese to a quiet stretch of road near Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Skylar, who had known the two girls since middle school, agreed to go with them on a late-night walk. Instead of letting her turn back, Rachel and Sheila drew kitchen knives and stabbed Skylar repeatedly, leaving her body hidden under leaves. Detectives later found Skylar's backpack and phone at Rachel's home, along with bloody clothing in a trash bag. Investigators traced calls and texts, showing Rachel plotting the attack days earlier, exactly when and where to meet. In interviews, Rachel admitted feeling jealous of Skylar's close friendship with other girls and claimed she wanted to teach her a lesson. The brutality shocked a community unused to such violence among teens. School teachers, neighbors, and family members struggled to understand how two classmates could carry out such a plan. Sheriff's deputies called it one of the coldest, most calculated killings they had seen. News crews camped outside Rachel's home as police followed every lead, and a candlelight vigil for Skylar filled the town square the night before the arrests. When Rachel stood before Judge John M. Drees in February 2014, the packed courtroom fell silent as prosecutors recounted each stab wound and replayed a jail call in which Rachel admitted her plan. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. When it was her turn to speak, she rose slowly, her voice trembling. "I take complete responsibility for what I did. I am so sorry to Skylar's family and to everyone I hurt." Her apology was sincere and raw, and she covered her face with her hands as sobs racked her frame. During victim impact statements, Skylar's mother described the empty place in her home where her daughter's laughter once echoed. Rachel watched through red-rimmed eyes as Skylar's father spoke of holding a bouquet at her grave, promising to keep her memory alive. Every time a family member paused to cry, Rachel bowed her head, letting her tears flow freely. The judge noted her contrition, but warned that remorse alone could not undo the crime. The contrast between her genuine sorrow and the deadly planning that led to Skylar's death made the moment heartrending for all who watched. Rachel accepted a plea deal for second-degree murder in exchange for avoiding a possible life without parole sentence. On March 7, 2014, Judge Dries sentenced her to 30 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 10 years served. As the judge pronounced the term, Rachel stood quietly, her posture straight but her shoulders trembling. Outside the courtroom, Skylar's family said the sentence offered some justice but could never fill the void left by her loss. In May 2023, after serving 10 years, Rachel applied for parole. In a hearing filled with media and family members, she again apologized, told of her efforts at counseling, and said she had grown through faith and study in prison. Still, the parole board denied her release, citing the crime's brutality and community safety concerns. A second bid in July 2024 likewise failed, with officials noting that many locals still fear the risk she might reoffend. Skylar's family founded the Skylar Niece Foundation to support teen mental health programs and anti-bullying efforts in Pennsylvania schools. Rachel's case has become a story of jealousy, and a deadly plan can destroy lives in seconds, and how remorse, even when heartfelt, must be weighed against public safety. In December 2018, 19-year-old Damon Kemp lived with two friends, Trey Ingram and Jordan Patton, in a small Daytona Beach apartment. Late one night, an argument over rent and shared bills turned violent. Witnesses heard loud footsteps and a single gunshot. When police entered the unit, they found Trey and Jordan lying at the foot of the bed, each shot once in the chest. Damon was still holding the gun. Neighbors told detectives they often heard shouting from the apartment but assumed it was just rowdy roommates. Security camera footage from outside the building captured Damon pacing before the shooting, clutching a small handgun he was not licensed to carry. No robbery took place. Damon did not take their wallets or phones, which led investigators to believe anger alone motivated the attack. He later admitted during questioning that he snapped after Trey accused him of stealing money, and Jordan laughed at him. At Damon's first court appearance, Judge Craig Capri asked if Damon understood the charges. Damon, pale and shaking, screamed, "God, God, God," over and over. His voice echoed through the courtroom. Bailiffs struggled to calm him as Trey and Jordan's families gasped and leaned forward. Judge Capri ordered a brief recess and examined Damon's mental state. When proceedings resumed, Damon sat quietly in a wheelchair, eyes hollow. Trey's sister spoke in a quavering voice. "He took my brother for no reason," before she broke into tears. Jordan's mother, clutching a photo of her son, said, "I will never see him again because you lost control." Damon stared at the floor, tears streaming down his cheeks. Then, as defense lawyers asked for a lowered bond, Damon suddenly locked eyes with the judge and screamed again. Judge Capri slammed his gavel, denied bond, and ordered Damon taken to a secure cell. The raw cries of "God" became a reminder that justice, once unleashed, leaves no room for mercy until guilt is proven. Damon's trial began in May 2023. He was found guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and home invasion with assault. On August 15, 2023, Judge Capri sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms. Damon remained expressionless as the judge spoke. Each life lost today demands its sentence. The harsh ruling stirred debate over how to handle violent teens in court. Some argued that at 19, Damon should face adult punishment without leniency. Others pointed to his breakdown and questioned his mental health when the bond was denied. Florida's juvenile justice advocates held rallies calling for separate treatment of young adults under 21. Trey and Jordan's families supported the life sentences. Outside, Trey's mother said, "No parole can bring them back, but it shows he can't hurt anyone else." Local safe housing groups launched workshops on conflict management, hoping to prevent roommate disputes from ending in tragedy. Damon's appeals are pending, with lawyers arguing that his bond hearing outbursts showed mental distress, requiring treatment, not punishment alone. The Daytona Beach community still reels from the night a friend turned killer, and Damon Kemp's fate serves as a warning. When anger and a gun meet in a young hand, the result can be a lifetime behind bars and a city forever changed. These 7 stories show just how deep the wounds of youth violence can run. Behind every life sentence, there are shattered families, haunted communities, and moments of raw emotion that echo long after the gavel falls. A court's decision may end one chapter, but the pain and questions it leaves behind can never be fully erased. Which courtroom moment shook you the most? Tears of remorse, cries of anger, or stunned silence. Chad Dorman's case shocked the nation with its sheer cruelty and premeditation. In June 2024, the quiet community of Monroe Township, Ohio, was rocked by the news of a father who murdered his 3 sons, ages 3, 4, and 7, in cold blood. This was no spur-of-the-moment crime. Dorman admitted in court that he had planned the murders for months. On that fateful day, he carried out his horrific plan with a rifle, turning a family home into a scene of unimaginable horror. The events unfolded when Dorman lined his sons up outside their house. He shot them one by one as they stood helpless, too young to comprehend the danger they faced. In a desperate attempt to save his life, the youngest son managed to escape into a nearby field. Tragically, Dorman pursued him, dragged him back, and killed him in front of horrified witnesses. The boy's mother tried to intervene but was shot in the head. Despite her injuries, she managed to call 911, describing the unimaginable events unfolding before her eyes. The courtroom was filled with heartbreak and disbelief as the case progressed. Prosecutor David Gast delivered a statement that left no one unmoved, describing the boys' deaths as the most sickening and horrifying crime he had ever encountered. Gast painted a vivid picture of the betrayal these innocent children suffered. These boys trusted him for love, safety, and guidance, but instead, he became the source of their ultimate fear and pain, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. As Gast recounted the events, many in the courtroom wept openly. Family members and observers were visibly shaken by the details. The mother, who had survived the ordeal, chose not to speak but submitted a written statement that the prosecutor read aloud. It described the unbearable pain of losing her sons and her inability to comprehend how the man she once trusted could commit such an act. Even the first responders who arrived at the scene were deeply affected. They described finding the boys' lifeless bodies and attempting CPR, knowing there was no hope. Guests commended their bravery, emphasizing that no amount of training could prepare anyone for such a traumatic scene. During the sentencing phase, Dorman remained emotionless. His lack of remorse or acknowledgement of the horror he caused only deepened the outrage felt by the family and community members present. The mother's injuries served as a grim reminder of her attempt to protect her sons, making the emotional toll of the trial even heavier. The judge imposed 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, the harshest penalty available under Ohio law. This decision ensured that Dorman would spend the rest of his life behind bars, never again posing a threat to society. The severity of this crime calls for the strictest punishment, the judge stated, echoing the sentiments of the grieving family and community. The $20 million bond set earlier in the trial was the highest in Claremont County's history, reflecting the judge's acknowledgement of the gravity of the case. This unprecedented amount underscored the danger Dorman posed and the magnitude of his crimes. The community rallied around the surviving family members, offering support and holding vigils to honor the 3 boys. Their tragic deaths served as a sobering reminder of the potential for evil to lurk within seemingly ordinary lives. Many in the community expressed frustration, questioning how such a premeditated act could go unnoticed during the months of planning Dorman admitted to. Law enforcement and social services also face scrutiny, with calls for better intervention and monitoring systems to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Advocates for child safety push for reforms, emphasizing the importance of vigilance in identifying signs of potential abuse or neglect. For the victim's mother, the pain is unending. Her statement during the sentencing reflected a mixture of grief, anger, and longing. They were my world, my everything. No punishment will ever bring them back, but at least he will never hurt anyone else, she wrote. In 2023, a devastating DUI crash shook Rock Hill, South Carolina, when Cassie Cunningham, under the influence of alcohol and marijuana, caused the death of 22-year-old Kristen Knight. Kristen, a young mother of 2, was driving her car on South Carolina Highway 161 when Cunningham's reckless speeding turned a quiet afternoon into a nightmare. Reports revealed that Cunningham was driving at 107 miles per hour when she rear-ended Kristen's vehicle at an intersection. The collision pushed Kristen's car across the median into another vehicle, leaving it completely crushed. She succumbed to her injuries shortly after being rushed to the hospital. The crash not only robbed 2 children of their mother, but also shattered the lives of everyone close to Kristen. The tragedy was made even more painful by the ironic twist that Cunningham had once cared for Kristen as a child at her family's daycare center. The courtroom was filled with a mix of grief, anger, and sorrow as Cunningham faced the consequences of her reckless actions. During her sentencing, Kristen's father, Tommy Knight, delivered a heart-wrenching impact statement. "My son asks me every day, 'Where's my mama?' he said, his voice trembling with emotion. He painted a vivid picture of the family's loss and the irreplaceable void Kristen's absence had created. Kristen's pregnant girlfriend, who had witnessed the crash, also spoke through tears. "I held him on the ground while he was dying," she said, recounting the traumatic moment she could never forget. Cunningham, visibly shaken, addressed Kristen's family with a tearful apology. She expressed deep remorse, saying, "Kristen was one of the children I once cared for. I will carry that memory with me for the rest of my life." She went on to promise that she would dedicate her life to spreading awareness about the dangers of impaired driving. However, her apology did little to ease the anger of Kristen's loved ones. For them, no words could undo the irreversible damage caused by Cunningham's actions. The defense tried to portray Cunningham as someone battling a lifelong struggle with addiction and mental health issues, including bipolar disorder and PTSD. They argued that these factors contributed to her reckless behavior. Cunningham's family also pleaded for mercy, describing her as a loving mother who had made a terrible mistake. However, the prosecution emphasized Cunningham's prior DUI conviction in 2008 and highlighted her history of dangerous behavior behind the wheel. Judge Brian Gibbons sentenced Cunningham to 23 years in prison, along with a $115,000 fine. He acknowledged her struggles with addiction and mental health, but made it clear that her actions required accountability. "God may forgive you, but there are consequences for your choices," the judge said during the sentencing. He stressed that the severity of the punishment reflected the devastating consequences of her recklessness. Kristen's family expressed mixed feelings about the sentence. While some found solace in the fact that justice was served, others felt that no punishment could truly make up for the loss of Kristen's life. "She didn't just take my daughter. She took a mother, a sister, and a friend," Kristen's mother said, her voice filled with pain. The tragedy sparked conversations about impaired driving and the importance of stricter enforcement of DUI laws. Advocates for road safety highlighted the need for better resources to help individuals struggling with addiction before their actions lead to irreversible harm. Kristen's family vowed to honor her memory by raising awareness about the dangers of reckless driving. Cunningham's case also underscored the need for more stringent measures to prevent repeat offenders from endangering lives. Her previous DUI conviction had resulted in only minor penalties, raising questions about whether stricter intervention at that time could have prevented this tragedy. For Kristen's children, the loss is immeasurable. Her father described how they often ask when their mother will come home, a question that breaks his heart every time. He pledged to keep her memory alive, ensuring her children would always know how much she loved them. In 2013, Detroit was shaken by a shocking crime committed by 12-year-old DeMarco Harris. During a robbery attempt, Harris shot and killed 24-year-old Trisha Babcock, a bright and loving woman who was just beginning to build her future. Trisha, a nursing student, had stopped at a gas station when Harris approached her. She refused to hand over her belongings, and in a horrifying moment, Harris fired a gun, ending her life. The incident left her family and the community in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how such a heinous act could come from someone so young. The case quickly gained national attention, not only because of the crime itself, but also due to Harris's age. The legal system faced the difficult task of determining how to handle a child who had committed such a violent act. The courtroom was filled with grief and outrage as Trisha's family faced the young boy responsible for her death. Her father, visibly shaken, spoke through tears during his victim impact statement. "You took my daughter, my bloodline, my everything," he said. "I will never see her walk down the aisle or hold her children. You stole her future and ours." The emotional weight of the trial was overwhelming. Trisha's grandmother also addressed the court, directing her anger at the system. He gets a chance to walk free at 21, but my granddaughter doesn't get a second chance at life, she said. Her words resonated with many who felt that justice might not fully account for the gravity of the crime. DeMarco's mother, devastated by her son's actions, pleaded for understanding. "Blame me," she said, sobbing as she faced Trisha's family. "I pray every day for forgiveness, and I pray for your family's healing." Her pain, though genuine, did little to ease the anger and sorrow in the courtroom. Harris, who had been silent throughout much of the proceedings, briefly addressed the court. "I'm sorry for what happened," he said, his voice barely audible. However, his apology was met with skepticism by Trisha's family, who questioned its sincerity and whether he truly understood the impact of his actions. The court's decision to try Harris as a juvenile sparked widespread debate. Under Michigan law, Harris could not be sentenced as an adult due to his age. Instead, he was sent to a juvenile detention facility with the possibility of release at 21 if deemed rehabilitated. This ruling enraged Trisha's family, who believed it failed to deliver justice for their loss. "This is a joke," Trisha's father said after the sentence was announced. "He took my daughter's life, and he could be free in a few years. What kind of example does this set for our community?" Many echoed his sentiments, expressing concern about the message the lenient sentence might send about accountability for violent crimes. The prosecution highlighted the difficulty of balancing justice with the recognition of Harris's young age. They acknowledged the potential for rehabilitation, but emphasized that Trisha's family would carry their grief for the rest of their lives, regardless of Harris's progress. The case of DeMarco Harris raised profound questions about how the justice system should handle children who commit violent crimes. Advocates for juvenile justice reform argued that Harris's age and background, marked by neglect and exposure to violence, should be considered mitigating factors. They emphasized the importance of rehabilitation over punishment for young offenders. However, for Trisha's family, the pain of their loss overshadowed any potential for redemption. They vowed to attend every hearing to ensure their voices were heard when Harris's case was reviewed at 21. "We won't let the system forget what he did," her father said. As Harris served his time in the juvenile facility, the broader community grappled with the implications of the case. It highlighted the need for preventative measures, such as better resources for at-risk youth and stricter gun control laws. Many questioned how a 12-year-old had access to a firearm and what could have been done to prevent the tragedy. On a tragic October evening in 2022, 18-year-old Elijah DeWitt, a high school football star with a bright future, was shot and killed in a mall parking lot in Lawrenceville, Georgia. The altercation stemmed from a dispute over a drug deal involving two men, Chandler Zion Richardson and Kamar Brand. What began as a petty disagreement escalated into a fatal encounter, leaving DeWitt's family and friends devastated. Richardson and Brand had approached DeWitt and his friend in the parking lot to confront them over an unpaid marijuana transaction. The situation quickly spiraled out of control when Brand pulled out a gun. During the struggle that ensued, DeWitt was shot multiple times and died at the scene. The senseless act of violence stunned the local community and left many questioning how such a promising young life could end so tragically. The courtroom was filled with raw emotion as DeWitt's family members shared their pain during the sentencing phase of the trial. His mother, Dawn, stood before the court, clutching a photograph of her son. Her voice cracked as she spoke of his dreams, his kindness, and the future he would never have. "Elijah was more than just my son," she said tearfully. "He was my best friend, my heart, and my reason to keep going. Now, all I have are memories." Elijah's father, standing stoically beside his wife, also addressed the court. "You took my son," he said, his voice heavy with anger and grief. "You took his future, his dreams, and everything he worked so hard for. And for what? A petty argument over drugs?" The prosecution presented recordings of jailhouse phone calls where Brand and Richardson showed little remorse for their actions. These recordings further fueled the family's anger, highlighting the lack of accountability from the defendants. Jurors and attendees in the courtroom were visibly moved by the family's testimony, many wiping away tears as they listened to the heartbreaking statements. In contrast, the defendants remained silent throughout most of the proceedings. When allowed to speak, Richardson offered a brief apology. "I'm sorry for what happened," he said, his words sounding hollow to DeWitt's grieving family. Brand, however, refused to acknowledge his role in the crime, maintaining a stoic demeanor that angered many in attendance. The trial concluded with different sentences for the two defendants, reflecting their roles in the crime. Chandler Zion Richardson, who was less directly involved in the shooting, received life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum term. The judge acknowledged Richardson's young age and lack of prior criminal history as mitigating factors, but emphasized the gravity of his actions. Kamar Bran, identified as the shooter, faced a harsher sentence. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge described his actions as cold-blooded and senseless, and emphasized the need for accountability. This was not a crime of passion or a split-second decision. The judge stated this was a deliberate and calculated act of violence that took an innocent life. The divided sentencing left DeWitt's family with mixed emotions. While they expressed relief that Bran would never walk free, they voiced concerns about Richardson's potential for parole. Elijah doesn't get a second chance at life, Dawn said. Why should they? Elijah DeWitt's death was a stark reminder of the consequences of violence and the pervasive issues surrounding youth involvement in drugs and crime. His story resonated deeply within the community, leading to calls for greater support systems for at-risk youth and increased security measures at public venues. In the aftermath of the trial, DeWitt's family established a scholarship fund in his name to honor his passion for football and education. We want Elijah's memory to inspire others to pursue their dreams and stay on the right path, Dawn said. The case also prompted discussions about sentencing disparities and the challenges of balancing justice with the potential for rehabilitation. Richardson's sentence sparked debate among legal experts and the public, with some arguing that his age and remorse warranted the possibility of parole, while others believed his involvement in such a heinous crime should result in a harsher penalty. In 2013, a violent altercation led to the murder of Mr. English and the severe injury of Mr. Fisk. Justin Chapman, then 17, was at the center of this tragic incident, which unfolded during a robbery attempt gone wrong. The case shocked the local community as the details revealed the devastating consequences of Chapman's actions. On the fateful day, Chapman, armed with a firearm, targeted Mr. English and Mr. Fisk in an aggressive confrontation. Witnesses reported that the altercation escalated quickly, resulting in Mr. English being fatally shot and Mr. Fisk suffering life-threatening injuries. The violence left families and friends grieving, while the community struggled to comprehend how a young man could commit such a heinous crime. During the trial, the courtroom was filled with emotions as the victims' families shared their pain. Mr. English's family gave heart-wrenching impact statements describing the depth of their loss. His wife, holding back tears, spoke about the void left in their lives. He was a loving husband and father, she said. Every day without him feels like a struggle to breathe. Mr. Fisk, who survived the encounter, also addressed the court, sharing the physical and emotional toll the attack had taken on him. I'll never be the same, he said. The scars on my body are a constant reminder of that day, but the emotional scars cut even deeper. The prosecution highlighted Chapman's lack of remorse as a key aspect of their argument. They presented evidence, including recordings and testimonies, to demonstrate that Chapman had shown no regret for his actions. This was not an impulsive mistake, the prosecutor argued. This was a deliberate act of violence fueled by greed and a complete disregard for human life. The defense attempted to shift the narrative, citing Chapman's troubled upbringing and lack of support as factors that contributed to his actions. They argued that his age and background should be considered in the sentencing. However, the prosecution countered by emphasizing the gravity of the crime and the impact on the victims' families. As the trial came to a close, the judge addressed Chapman directly. "Your actions have left a permanent mark on this community," the judge said sternly. "You took a life and forever altered another. The consequences of your choices extend far beyond this courtroom." Chapman was sentenced to 35 years to life in prison, with eligibility for parole, after serving the mandatory minimum. The sentence reflected the severity of the crime and the need for accountability, while also leaving a room for potential rehabilitation in the future. The judge noted that this balance was intentional, recognizing the potential for change while ensuring justice for the victims and their families. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read, with many reflecting on the weight of the decision. For the families of Mr. English and Mr. Fisk, the sentencing brought some sense of closure, though it could never fully heal the wounds left by the tragedy. "Justice has been served," Mr. English's wife said afterward, "but no sentence can bring back the life we lost." The case of Justin Chapman became a topic of intense debate, raising questions about juvenile sentencing and the potential for rehabilitation. While some viewed the sentence as fair, others argued that it was either too lenient or too harsh, reflecting the ongoing challenges in balancing justice and compassion. For the community, the tragedy served as a stark reminder of the consequences of violence and the importance of addressing the root causes of crime. Local organizations began advocating for programs to support at-risk youth, hoping to prevent similar incidents in the future. Meanwhile, the families of Mr. English and Mr. Fisk continued to cope with their loss, finding solace in their memories and the support of their community. For them, the trial was not just about punishment, but about ensuring that their loved ones' voices were heard and their stories remembered. In 2016, Akira McCrae, a 22-year-old man, was convicted of second-degree murder for the killing of Kenetta Barnes, a mother of 7. The tragedy unfolded during a heated domestic dispute, leaving the community of Pontiac, Michigan, reeling. McCrae's actions resulted in an unimaginable loss for the Barnes family, as their loved one was taken from them in a moment of senseless violence. The incident occurred during an argument between McCrae and Barnes, who had reportedly been in a relationship. Tensions escalated to the point where McCrae fatally shot Barnes in front of her children. One of her daughters was also injured but survived the attack. The brutal nature of the crime shocked those who knew Barnes, a devoted mother whose life revolved around her family. The trial brought raw emotions to the forefront as Barnes's family faced the man who had shattered their lives. The courtroom was packed with her loved ones, each grappling with the enormity of their loss. During the sentencing hearing, Barnes's children and relatives delivered impact statements, painting a vivid picture of her life and the void left in her absence. Her eldest daughter, holding back tears, described the devastation of losing her mother. "You took away the person who held our family together," she said, her voice trembling. "She was our rock, and now we have to navigate life without her." The pain in her words resonated deeply with everyone in the room, highlighting the far-reaching effects of McCrae's actions. Just before his sentencing, McCrae briefly addressed the court, offering a few remorseful words. "I am sorry for what I've done," he said. "I know I can't undo the pain I've caused, and I take full responsibility for my actions." However, his apology did little to quell the anger and sorrow felt by Barnes's family. For them, no words could make up for the loss of their beloved mother, sister, and friend. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak after the sentencing was announced. As McCrae was being led away in handcuffs, a family member shouted his name, triggering an emotional outburst. The judge called for order, but the eruption of grief and frustration was a stark reminder of the profound impact of the crime. McCrae was sentenced to 30 to 60 years in prison for second-degree murder. The judge acknowledged the gravity of the crime, emphasizing the irreparable harm done to the Barnes family. "Your actions have deprived a family of their mother and left a lasting scar on this community," the judge said during sentencing. "This punishment reflects the seriousness of your crime and the need for accountability." For Barnes's family, the sentencing provided some measure of justice, though it could never bring back their loved one. Speaking outside the courtroom, her brother expressed mixed emotions. "We're grateful for the sentence, but it doesn't ease the pain," he said. "Our family will never be the same without Kenetta." The case also sparked conversations about domestic violence and the need for better support systems for victims. Community leaders called for increased awareness and resources to prevent similar tragedies, highlighting the importance of addressing the root causes of such violence. In the years following the trial, Barnes's children have worked to honor their mother's memory, leaning on one another for strength. They have shared stories of her kindness, resilience, and love, ensuring that her legacy lives on. "She was the kind of person who would give you the shirt off her back," her daughter said. "We want to carry that spirit forward and make her proud." While McCrae serves his sentence, the Barnes family continues to heal, drawing support from their community and each other. The courtroom drama may have ended, but the emotional journey for those left behind is ongoing. For them, justice was served, but the scars of that fateful day will remain forever. Courtrooms expose the raw emotions and devastating consequences of crime, reminding us of the weight of justice. These cases reveal the lasting scars left on families and communities while raising profound questions about humanity and accountability.
I find disturbing about this case, but the fact that you brought 2 juveniles into the picture.
The courtroom was tense as Sharon Kelly faced judgment for orchestrating a murder-for-hire plot against her ex-husband, Baron Lee, in 2016. The case, marked by betrayal and greed, captivated the public. Kelly, a 30-year-old woman from Mount Lake Terrace, had paid 2 teenagers $113,000 to carry out the attack. The scene unfolded in a Bellevue parking lot, where Lee, unaware of the looming danger, was ambushed and shot 9 times. Despite his critical injuries, he survived, a testament to both his willpower and sheer luck. The attack stemmed from a bitter custody battle over their son. Kelly stood to gain financially if she won sole custody, a motive that painted her actions in an even darker light. In court, prosecutors detailed her cold, calculated decisions, including recruiting minors to commit the crime. The juveniles carried out the shooting without fully understanding the gravity of their actions, adding another layer of tragedy to the case. Baron Lee took the stand during the trial, delivering a heartfelt and harrowing testimony. He described the physical and emotional toll of surviving the attack. His words were filled with a mix of pain and frustration as he passionately opposed the plea deal that limited Kelly's sentence. Lee's objections were not just about justice for himself, but also about holding Kelly accountable for the trauma she caused. "You took my life away," he declared, his voice breaking as he recounted the long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. Lee's testimony resonated deeply with the courtroom, leaving many in tears. He spoke of the permanent scars on his body, the months of rehabilitation, and the lingering fear that haunted his every step. For Lee, the attack wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a life-altering event that stripped him of normalcy. The courtroom was silent as he described the pain of knowing someone he once loved and trusted had orchestrated such a heinous act. Kelly, visibly emotional, addressed the court, claiming she regretted her actions and their impact on her son. She stated that she never intended for anyone to suffer, but admitted that her desperation clouded her judgment. However, her apology did little to sway public opinion or the prosecutors, who emphasized her deliberate and premeditated actions. Her defense argued that Kelly had been under immense stress due to the custody battle, and that her mental state played a role in her poor decision-making. They also highlighted her cooperation during the investigation and her guilty plea as signs of remorse. However, prosecutors rebutted these claims, pointing out that Kelly had multiple opportunities to back out of the plot, but chose to proceed. The involvement of teenagers in the crime further amplified the tragedy. The 2 young perpetrators, barely out of high school, were initially unaware of the full consequences of their actions. They too faced legal consequences, with one serving time in a juvenile facility and the other transitioning to adult detention upon turning 25. When it came time for sentencing, the judge acknowledged the gravity of the crime and the emotional weight it carried. The court imposed a 13-year prison sentence, the maximum within the terms of the plea deal. For Lee, however, the sentence felt insufficient. His plea for a harsher punishment was heartfelt but ultimately constrained by the legal framework of the deal. "No amount of time will erase what happened," Lee said, his voice filled with both sadness and resignation.
"I wish that I could do more than just use my words to express my sorrow." Why did her brother have to go away to heaven? The only time that Carly gets to see her brother now is when she dreams of him in her sleep, of their happy memories.
The courtroom fell silent as the case of Lauren Courtney, a babysitter who committed an unimaginable crime, unfolded before the judge and jury. Courtney was convicted of first-degree murder after shocking surveillance footage exposed her horrific actions against 5-year-old Ryan Peralta. What began as a routine babysitting arrangement turned into a tragedy that devastated a family and shook the community. Ryan Peralta was a bright, happy child with a promising future. His parents, needing a trusted caregiver, left him in the care of Lauren Courtney. However, what they didn't know was that this decision would lead to a nightmare they could never have imagined. On the fateful day, Ryan fell victim to a series of brutal and heartless actions that ended his life. The surveillance footage was a key piece of evidence in the trial, and its contents were so disturbing that even seasoned investigators struggled to watch it. The video revealed Courtney screaming at the child, dragging him around the house, and physically abusing him. Ryan could be seen crying and vomiting, clearly in distress. Instead of helping him, Courtney continued to berate and harm him. Prosecutors described how she left Ryan lying on the couch for over an hour, ignoring his cries for help and failing to seek medical assistance. Prosecutor Michelle Job delivered a powerful and emotional statement during the trial, painting a vivid picture of Ryan's suffering. The last minutes of that child's life were pure horror, Job said, her voice trembling. She recounted how Courtney's actions were not the result of an impulsive mistake, but a deliberate series of cruel decisions. Job dismissed the defense's claim that Courtney might have been sleepwalking, calling it an insult to the gravity of the case and the evidence presented. As the trial progressed, the court heard from the presiding judge, Jacqueline Bluth, whose words left a lasting impact. She described the unimaginable pain Ryan endured in his final moments. A 5-year-old understands every blow, every stomp, and every scream of hate, Judge Bluth stated. For 26 long minutes, Ryan knew what was happening to him, and he knew that the person meant to protect him was the one causing him harm. Courtroom reactions were intense as these details were laid bare. Members of the jury, court staff, and even onlookers were seen wiping away tears. The emotional weight of the case was palpable, with Ryan's absence felt deeply by everyone present. His parents were unable to attend the sentencing, overwhelmed by the trauma of losing their beloved son. In their place, the prosecutor read a heartfelt statement from Ryan's father, who expressed the family's grief and shared how Ryan's sister was struggling to cope. She asks why her brother had to go to heaven. The statement read, "And the only time she sees him now is in her dreams." The defense attempted to portray Courtney as someone under immense stress, arguing that she was not in full control of her actions that day. However, the evidence was overwhelming. The surveillance footage not only captured her abuse, but also revealed that she had lied to authorities, initially trying to shift the blame onto Ryan's father. These attempts to deflect responsibility only solidified the court's view of her guilt. When it came time for Courtney to address the court, she turned to Ryan's family and offered a tearful apology. "I wish I could do more than just use words to express my sorrow," she said. However, her words rang hollow to many, especially in light of the harrowing evidence against her. For Ryan's family, no apology could ever bring back their son or erase the pain of his loss. The court ultimately sentenced Lauren Courtney to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. This sentence reflected the severity of her crime, while allowing for the possibility of rehabilitation and review. However, she would remain under lifetime supervision, even if paroled, ensuring she could never again harm another child.
Things that involve my case as far as the evidence that I hold, which is Q classified evidence, which should be turned over to judge.
The case of Dejon Anderson was one of the most unsettling trials in recent years, not only for the horrifying crime she was accused of, but also for her erratic and bizarre behavior during the proceedings. Anderson, an Atlanta woman, was charged with the murder of her 5-year-old son, Cairo Jordan, whose body was found abandoned in a suitcase in Washington County, Indiana. What unfolded in the courtroom raised serious questions about her mental competency and left onlookers stunned. In April 2022, a gruesome discovery shocked the small community of Washington County. A passerby stumbled upon a suitcase containing Cairo's remains, which had been discarded in a wooded area. The discovery led to a months-long investigation, during which law enforcement pieced together a tragic story. Anderson, who had been on the run for several months, was arrested in California in October 2022. The charges against her included murder, neglect of a dependent resulting in death, and obstruction of justice. Anderson's first court appearance in Indiana drew significant attention due to her strange and unsettling behavior. As the judge asked her to state her name, she responded with, "I am Princess Kia representing the entity Dejon Anderson." Her tone was calm but unnervingly detached, and she repeatedly made references to being under surveillance by NASA and other outlandish claims. At times, she smiled, showing little emotion or remorse, which further unsettled those present. The courtroom reaction to Anderson's statements was one of disbelief and shock. The judge, visibly taken aback, questioned her mental fitness to stand trial. Prosecutors argued that Anderson was a danger to society and requested that she be denied bond, citing her history of evasion and her erratic behavior. Anderson objected, stating she wasn't a fugitive because NASA had been watching her from space. Her self-representation in the trial added another layer of complexity. She refused to accept legal counsel, insisting that she could represent herself. The judge warned her of the challenges, stating that she would need to understand the rules of evidence and procedure. Anderson's response was dismissive, claiming that she didn't need to follow conventional legal practices. As the proceedings continued, 2 doctors evaluated Anderson's mental competency. Both concluded that she was not currently fit to stand trial or assist in her defense. Their findings pointed to severe mental health issues that required immediate attention. The court subsequently ordered her commitment to a state psychiatric facility for treatment, pausing the trial until she could be deemed competent to proceed. For the community, the details of Cairo's death were deeply troubling. Authorities revealed that Cairo's body showed signs of neglect and abuse. The little boy's tragic fate was a sobering reminder of the vulnerability of children and the devastating consequences of neglect. His death prompted calls for stricter monitoring of at-risk children and improved mental health resources for parents. Cairo's family, devastated by the loss, chose not to attend the hearings. A family spokesperson later expressed their heartbreak, stating that they hope justice would be served, not only for Cairo, but also to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Despite the delays in her trial, Anderson's case remained a focal point of public attention. The judge's decision to commit her to a psychiatric facility was met with mixed reactions. Some believed it was a necessary step to ensure a fair trial, while others argued that it delayed justice for Cairo. As of late 2024, Anderson remained in the psychiatric facility, undergoing treatment. Her trial was yet to resume, leaving many questions about the outcome of this tragic case.
I'm so sorry, Jason, Shauna, and Jamie, for causing you harm. I never meant to. A lot of lives changed that day, and I pray every day for your family.
The case of Alexis Groves is a stark reminder of how reckless behavior can lead to unimaginable tragedy. In 2017, Groves, under the influence of methamphetamines, crashed into another vehicle while fleeing from police in a stolen van. The collision resulted in the deaths of 52-year-old Shauna Arredondo Bowling and her 14-year-old daughter, Shaylee Bowling. The courtroom drama surrounding her trial and sentencing left a deep impression on all who followed the case. The incident occurred in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when Groves, in a bid to evade law enforcement, ran a red light at high speed, slamming into the Bowling family's car. Witnesses described the crash as catastrophic, with the impact so severe that it left little chance of survival for the victims. Investigators later revealed that Groves was driving a stolen van, had multiple prior arrests, and was under the influence of methamphetamines at the time. As details of the case emerged, emotions ran high in the community. The tragic loss of a mother and daughter deeply affected friends, family, and neighbors, who expressed outrage and grief. Groves's actions were not only seen as reckless, but as an utter disregard for human life. The courtroom proceedings were marked by intense debates, particularly over Groves's pre-trial detention. Her attorney argued that Groves lacked a serious criminal history and posed no ongoing threat to the community. However, prosecutors vehemently disagreed, highlighting the gravity of the charges and the danger she posed. They argued that Groves should be held without bond, emphasizing the devastating consequences of her actions. The New Mexico Supreme Court ultimately upheld the decision to deny Groves bond, citing her as a danger to society. This ruling set an important precedent, affirming the constitutional amendment allowing judges to order pre-trial detention for defendants considered a threat to public safety. The court emphasized that such decisions require careful discretion and are not to be applied indiscriminately. During her trial, Groves showed little emotion, further fueling the anger and frustration of the victims' families. The prosecution presented evidence detailing her erratic behavior, substance abuse, and attempts to flee the scene after the crash. Witnesses recounted the harrowing moments following the collision, describing the chaos, the cries for help, and the overwhelming sense of loss. Shauna and Shaylee's family members delivered powerful impact statements, sharing the profound grief they experienced. Shauna's husband spoke about the irreplaceable void left in their lives, while Shaylee's friends described her as a bright and compassionate teenager whose future was tragically cut short. Their words left many in the courtroom in tears, underscoring the devastating consequences of Groves's actions. The defense argued that Groves's substance abuse issues and difficult upbringing contributed to her poor decisions. They pleaded for leniency, requesting a sentence that would allow her the possibility of rehabilitation. However, the prosecution countered that her repeated reckless behavior and lack of accountability warranted the harshest punishment. In November 2021, Alexis Groves was sentenced to 252 years in prison, a sentence designed to reflect the severity of her crimes. The judge emphasized the need for accountability and justice for the victims, stating that Groves's actions had caused irreparable harm. The sentence, though symbolic, sent a clear message about the consequences of such reckless behavior. Groves's case also sparked discussions about the challenges of addressing substance abuse and its impact on public safety. Many questioned how someone with a history of drug use and criminal behavior was able to continue endangering others. The tragedy served as a call to action for stronger intervention measures and support systems to prevent similar incidents in the future.
And had evidence of chronic physical abuse and possible torture, including deep ligature marks to both ankles and large patches of skin missing from his upper chest.
The case of Kayla Holzendorf is one of heartbreaking cruelty, where a mother inflicted unimaginable pain on her child, leading to his tragic death. In 2023, Holzendorf was convicted of the capital murder of her 8-year-old son, Keon Holzendorf. The trial exposed shocking evidence of severe abuse, leaving the courtroom gripped by overwhelming emotions. Keon's death occurred in March 2021 when emergency responders found him unresponsive in a Houston, Texas motel room. Holzendorf initially claimed that her son had drowned in the bathtub. However, investigators quickly discovered a disturbing reality. Keon's body bore multiple injuries that pointed to chronic abuse and possible torture. Deep ligature marks on his ankles, large patches of missing skin, and bruises indicated prolonged suffering. During the trial, prosecutors detailed the horrific extent of Keon's abuse. They presented evidence of repeated physical assaults and neglect. Witnesses described how Holzendorf and her common-law husband, Dominique Lewis, had isolated Keon, subjected him to severe punishment, and failed to provide him with medical care. The prosecution argued that Holzendorf's actions showed a complete lack of regard for her son's life. The courtroom reaction was intense as these horrifying details were revealed. Jurors, spectators, and even seasoned legal professionals were visibly shaken. Many struggled to hold back tears, while others expressed outrage at the sheer brutality of the case. Prosecutors emphasized the betrayal of trust, highlighting that Keon should have been protected by his mother, not subjected to such cruelty. Holzendorf's defense argued that she was unfit to stand trial due to her mental state. Her attorneys claimed that she had a history of mental health issues and could not understand the gravity of her actions. However, court-appointed psychiatrists determined that Holzendorf was competent to stand trial, allowing the case to proceed. Keon's death had a profound impact on the community. Neighbors recounted how they had rarely seen the boy outside and had no idea about the horrors he was enduring. Social services had previously visited the family, but the extent of the abuse went unnoticed until it was too late. This failure sparked discussions about the need for better child welfare monitoring and intervention. The most heart-wrenching moments of the trial came during the victim impact statements. Family members and community advocates spoke about Keon's bright and loving nature, painting a picture of a child who had his entire life ahead of him. They demanded justice for the boy, whose voice had been silenced by those who were supposed to care for him. In March 2023, Holzendorf pleaded guilty to capital murder to avoid the death penalty. By admitting her role in Keon's death, she faced a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The judge stated that the sentence reflected the gravity of the crime and the need to protect society from such acts. The sentencing provided some closure for Keon's family and supporters, though the pain of his loss remained. Advocates for children's rights called for systemic changes to prevent similar tragedies. They emphasized the importance of early intervention, better training for child welfare professionals, and stronger safeguards to protect vulnerable children. Holzendorf's common-law husband, Dominique Lewis, was also charged in connection with Keon's death. His trial is pending, with prosecutors seeking a similar sentence. Evidence suggests that both Holzendorf and Lewis played active roles in the boy's abuse, making them equally accountable for his tragic fate.
Having found you guilty of that offense, you're hereby sentenced to serve a term of 20 years in the institutional division. I'll give you credit for the time you served.
The case of Megan Works shocked the nation in 2018 when she was sentenced for her role in the tragic death of her 2-year-old son, Colton Turner. Alongside her boyfriend, Michael Turner, Megan not only played a part in her son's death, but also helped conceal his body, deepening the heartbreak for Colton's grieving family. Colton's death in 2014 was discovered after an intense investigation by authorities in Austin, Texas. Megan Work had initially reported her son missing, but conflicting accounts and suspicious behavior soon pointed to foul play. After days of questioning, Megan finally confessed that Colton was dead and led police to his burial site, a shallow grave in a wooded area near Austin. During the trial, horrifying details emerged about the circumstances surrounding Colton's death. Testimony revealed that Colton suffered immense physical abuse in the days leading up to his death. Witnesses described how Megan and her boyfriend had subjected the toddler to a life of neglect, exposing him to violence and instability. The court learned that Colton's final moments were filled with fear and pain, facts that deeply affected everyone in the courtroom. The courtroom reaction was one of overwhelming emotion as Colton's family members took the stand. Colton's grandmother tearfully recounted how the young boy had brought joy to everyone who knew him, making his loss all the more devastating. Family members expressed their heartbreak and anger at Megan's betrayal as a mother, emphasizing how her role as Colton's protector had been tragically reversed. Judge David Wahlberg also delivered a powerful statement during the sentencing. He described the case as one of the most emotionally challenging he had encountered in his career. The judge emphasized the unique bond between a mother and her child, calling Megan's actions an unforgivable violation of that trust. He underscored her greater responsibility as Colton's biological mother, contrasting it with Michael Turner's role as a stepfather. "You were supposed to protect him, love him, and nurture him," Judge Wahlberg said, addressing Megan directly. "Instead, you allowed him to suffer and die at the hands of those who should have cared for him most. Your betrayal is one of the worst imaginable." The prosecution presented evidence that Megan had actively participated in covering up Colton's death. After the boy died, Megan and Michael worked together to hide his body, evading authorities for weeks. The pair even attempted to mislead investigators with false stories, adding to the pain of Colton's family as they searched for answers. Megan's defense team argued that she had been a victim of abuse herself and was under the influence of Michael Turner at the time of the crime. They painted her as a vulnerable individual who lacked the strength to stand up to her boyfriend. However, the court rejected this narrative, focusing on Megan's responsibility as a mother. Ultimately, Megan Work was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Judge Wahlberg stated that the sentence reflected the gravity of her actions while allowing some opportunity for rehabilitation. Megan's boyfriend, Michael Turner, received a 20-year sentence for his role in the crime. Both sentences brought a sense of justice to Colton's family, though no punishment could fully heal the loss they endured. Megan's sentence allows for the possibility of parole after serving half her term, which has raised concerns among Colton's family. They have vowed to fight any early release, ensuring that Megan remains behind bars for as long as possible. Colton's loved ones have also used their tragedy to advocate for stronger child protection laws, hoping to prevent similar cases in the future. Courtrooms reveal humanity's darkest moments, where justice and emotions collide. These cases remind us of the profound impact of crime, not just on victims, but on families and communities. The trial of 32-year-old Sahara T, sometimes noted as Sahara T. Breeze Fakir. She was accused of murdering 66-year-old Jerry Wheeler, a respected businessman, husband, and grandfather. The crime sent shockwaves through the community, especially given the brutal nature of his death. investigators discovered Wheeler's body with multiple stab wounds, leading the district attorney to pursue a first-degree murder charge. Sahara was caught about a month after the incident, which allowed time for rumors and local news coverage to build a sense of dread around her upcoming court appearance. At the initial hearing, the judge began by reading Sahara's charges. Immediately, her behavior turned odd. She ranted about the courthouse being cursed, claiming that if anyone judged her, they would face punishment from a higher power. People in the gallery exchanged confused glances. It became clear this would be no ordinary arraignment. The judge politely explained Sahara's right to legal counsel, saying she could apply for a public defender if she could not afford her attorney. Sahara dismissed the offer, demanding immediate release and calling the entire system disbelievers. She declared that Allah is my lawyer and threatened that vengeance would fall upon everyone present if they did not let her go. As the trial moved forward, Sahara continued to be disruptive. During pre-trial motions, she would stand up abruptly, shout at the judge, and declare the environment was evil. The judge, maintaining composure, tried to keep the proceedings on track. Court officers stood ready to remove her if she became too aggressive. Several times, the judge had to remind her that outbursts could lead to contempt charges, but Sahara seemed oblivious or unconcerned. Prosecutors laid out their evidence. Footprints matching Sahara's shoes at the crime scene, Wheeler's blood on clothing recovered from her home, and text messages suggesting she had planned to confront him. They argued that she tried to rob him. The situation escalated, and she stabbed him multiple times. Sahara's erratic statements offered no real defense, other than claiming a divine right to be freed. In the end, Sahara was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge scheduled a separate sentencing hearing, hoping she would appear calmer, but at the sentencing, her theatrics persisted. When the judge pronounced life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, Sahara stomped her feet, cursed the judge, and said everyone in the room would pay for not believing in her. Court officers stepped in to escort her out, while the victim's family watched in a mixture of relief and disbelief. Local news outlets aired clips of Sahara's meltdown, labeling her the cursed courthouse Karen. Social media buzzed with opinions. Some people felt she had serious mental health issues, while others believed she was simply manipulative. The victim's family spoke briefly to reporters, stating that justice was served for Jerry Wheeler, though they found Sahara's behavior unsettling and disrespectful. They appreciated the judge's calm approach in the face of her insults. Despite Sahara's dramatic protests, the evidence left no doubt about her guilt. In prison, she carries a label of being unpredictable and combative. Observers note that her story highlights how dangerous some individuals can be when they feel above the law. Her case is now cited in Douglas County as one of the strangest examples of a defendant's meltdown at sentencing. For the Wheeler family, seeing Sahara removed in handcuffs offered some closure, though they remain saddened by the cruel nature of Jerry's death. They hope the severe sentence sends a message. No matter how loudly someone rants or blames the system, the truth eventually emerges and justice will be done, even for the most dramatic Karens. Kimberly Kessler's case in Nassau County, Florida, drew national attention for her bizarre acts in court and her hidden past. At 50 years old, she was finally arrested after being on the run for over 2 decades, using multiple fake identities. The charge: killing her co-worker, 34-year-old Jolene Cummings, and disposing of the body so thoroughly that authorities never found it. Cummings was a mother of 3, and her disappearance deeply shook the community. From the start, Kessler showed a Karen attitude: loud, defiant, and convinced of conspiracies against her. She accused the public defender of being related to the victim's family, screaming at the judge to dismiss everyone on her legal team. Early in the process, she engaged in hunger strikes, dropping from around 196 pounds to a fragile 74 pounds. Guards had to wheel her into the courtroom. Despite her claims of illness, mental health evaluations deemed her competent. The judge proceeded with the trial, ignoring her attempts to stall. At trial, the prosecution presented damning evidence. Kessler had suspicious internet queries such as co-worker guilty of murder, missing person body not found, and no body, no crime. Surveillance footage placed her at the salon with Jolene shortly before Cummings vanished. Cummings's car was later discovered near a gas station with Kessler on nearby cameras acting suspiciously. Even more disturbing was the search history showing interest in how to hide or dispose of remains. Behind bars, Kessler's behavior was worse. She reportedly threw feces at guards, stripped off clothes unexpectedly, and screamed about conspiracies at all hours. The sheriff's office documented multiple incidents, describing her as one of the most difficult inmates they'd ever handled. Anytime she had a court date, staff braced for outbursts. Despite her attempts to derail the proceedings, like refusing to appear in person, Kessler stood trial and was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge handed down a life sentence without parole, calling her crimes deliberate and cruel. Kessler erupted, shouting about the unfair system and repeating her claims that the public defender was related to Jolene's cousin. The judge had her wheeled out again, ending the trial with an unforgettable scene. The media labeled her the fake alias Karen, highlighting her tantrums and constant refusal to cooperate. Jolene's family expressed relief but sadness that her body was never recovered. They said they would have preferred a confession so they could lay Jolene to rest properly. The court's final judgment offered some closure as Kessler lost all chance of freedom. Viewers who saw snippets of the trial footage called Kessler's meltdown terrifying yet bizarrely Karen-like, as though she believed the court should just believe her wild accusations. Some mental health professionals suspected severe personality disorders, while others saw a manipulative side, trying to fake incompetence. In the end, Kimberly Kessler remains in a Florida prison, serving her life term. Reports indicate she still has disciplinary issues, continuing a pattern of lashing out at staff or claiming conspiracies. For the community, her story stands as a reminder that sometimes a truly dangerous person can mask themselves under many names, until their rage and entitlement surface in an irreversible act of violence. Detroit authorities stumbled upon one of the most horrifying child abuse cases in 2015 when they evicted Michelle Blair from her apartment and discovered 2 of her children's bodies in a chest freezer. Dubbed the Freezer Mom, Blair insisted she killed them on purpose, showing no regret. The entire city recoiled at the cruelty, and local media described it as one of the most disturbing crimes in decades. A typical eviction quickly became a crime scene. A moving crew from the local sheriff's department opened a white freezer, expecting to toss out old food or junk. Instead, they found the wrapped remains of a small child. Moments later, they noticed something else, a second body, equally frozen. Stunned, they called for backup. Police arrived and arrested Blair, who offered an immediate confession. During court hearings, Blair openly admitted that she had killed her 13-year-old daughter, Stoney, and her 9-year-old son, Stephen. She claimed they had molested her youngest child, though no evidence backed up that accusation. Her calm demeanor was chilling. She told the judge, "I'd kill them again if I had to." The entire courtroom fell silent at her statement. Blair described how she starved, beat, and eventually took the children's lives, then stored them in the freezer. She justified her actions by painting them as demons. The judge, visibly disturbed, tried to probe for any sign of remorse. Instead, Blair insisted that she slept fine at night, feeling no guilt for what she had done. Judge Dana Hathaway delivered a scathing rebuke, pointing out that Blair had deprived 2 young souls of life and that her claims of justice were merely a brutal rationalization. Ultimately, the court sentenced Blair to life in prison without parole. During the sentencing, Blair showed little reaction. She folded her arms, nodded, and reaffirmed she had no regrets. Detroit residents, many of whom followed the story closely, were horrified at the intimate details that emerged. News footage capturing Blair's testimony spread online, with viewers labeling her as monstrous and beyond redemption. Community members gathered to provide care for Blair's surviving children, who were placed in protective custody. Even seasoned police officers said it was one of the worst things they had seen. Blair was a classic Karen of the most terrifying variety, entitled and unyielding, believing her actions were justified. She argued against any attempts at mental health defense, stating she was perfectly aware of what she did. Her arrogant tone toward the judge made it clear she felt she had the moral high ground. But in the eyes of the law, her admission sealed her fate. Many hoped Blair's case would spur improvements in child welfare checks. The neighbors had suspected something was off, but no one realized that the children were missing or in a freezer. Advocates called for earlier interventions when parents with long histories of anger or violence appear on the radar. Though Blair claims she would do it all over, The outcome is that she will never be free again. The heartbreak of this case lingers in Detroit's memory, reminding everyone how vital it is to protect innocent children, especially when warning signs are present. Michelle Blair's meltdown in court, with zero remorse, stands as a stark example of the darkest side of Karen-like entitlement, where she believed her twisted reasoning excused the unthinkable. In 2015, Colorado authorities encountered a horrifying case that made national headlines. 35-year-old Dinah Lane was so desperate to prove she was pregnant that she violently attacked a pregnant stranger, cutting out the unborn child. This stomach-turning crime began when Lane, who had faked an entire pregnancy, posted a Craigslist ad seeking baby clothes. A pregnant woman named Michelle Wilkins responded, never suspecting the danger awaiting her. Michelle, who was 7 months pregnant, went to Lane's home to discuss the items she believed were up for sale. After a brief conversation, Lane suddenly attacked her, stabbing and choking her. In a grim act, Lane used a kitchen knife to cut Michelle's abdomen and remove the fetus. Michelle lost consciousness and Lane fled with the unborn baby, claiming it was her miscarriage. Police found Michelle in critical condition, but still alive. At Lane's trial, the prosecution laid out the monstrous details. They explained that Lane had told friends and family she was pregnant for months, holding a baby shower, and even showing ultrasound pictures she doctored. The pressure to produce a baby led her to commit an unimaginable crime. Wilkins testified about the moment she realized Lane was attacking her. Struggling to breathe and losing blood, she managed to call 911. Her haunting call was played in court, leaving many in tears. Lane faced charges of attempted murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and assault. Cameras captured her sitting at the defense table, appearing tense and at times tearful. She admitted to cutting out the baby, but claimed she had no intention to kill Michelle. The judge, clearly disturbed, condemned Lane's actions, stating they showed a shocking disregard for human life. He sentenced her to a total of 100 years in prison. Lane broke into tears, though many observers felt it was more despair for her fate than remorse for what she had done. Michelle Wilkins addressed the court, describing the terror and pain she endured. She insisted that no sentence could erase the emotional and physical scars. Still, she expressed a desire to forgive, saying she would not let hatred define her. Wilkins explained that her child was taken in the worst possible way, and Lane's punishment needed to reflect the extreme harm caused. The local community followed every twist, with many calling Lane a deranged Karen who believed she could lie her way into motherhood. Some pushed for stronger legislation against crimes involving unborn babies. Under Colorado law, Lane could not be charged with murder of the fetus, sparking debate about fetal homicide statutes. Lane sits in a Colorado prison, serving what amounts to a life sentence. She rarely grants interviews, and officials report she keeps to herself. Michelle Wilkins has since become an advocate for prenatal violence awareness, speaking at public events about her experience. She emphasizes the importance of caution when answering online ads, reminding people that behind a friendly facade, there can lurk someone capable of horrifying brutality. No matter how Lane tried to spin the situation, her meltdown in court showed a woman who realized her delusional plan had destroyed 2 lives, Michelle's unborn baby and any freedom Lane could ever hope for. In the end, her Karen-like sense of entitlement led her to commit a crime that would keep her behind bars for decades. In a 2022 case that shocked Minnesota, 29-year-old Julissa Thaler killed her 6-year-old son, Eli. Despite warnings from child services and the boy's father, Thaler obtained custody not long before the murder. When Eli's body was later found in the trunk of Thaler's car, riddled with gunshot wounds, onlookers were left speechless. The situation highlighted the system's failure to protect an endangered child. The father, Tory Hart, had raised concerns about Thaler's unstable behavior, alleged drug use, and mental health issues. However, the family court decided to reunite mother and child, citing attempts for family preservation. Just days later, a police officer stopped Thaler due to a shattered back windshield and found blood inside the car. Moments later, they discovered Eli's body in the trunk, apparently shot multiple times. During the trial in Hennepin County, Thaler showed a range of disturbing behaviors. At one point, she claimed innocence and began shouting profanities at the judge. Some bystanders nicknamed her Karen for her loud, entitled approach in court, acting as if the system owed her leniency despite the overwhelming evidence. The prosecution showed ballistic reports tying the gun to Thaler's home, along with phone records of her searching for ways to get rid of unwanted kids. Her defense tried to claim mental instability, pointing to bizarre statements Thaler made about voices in her head, but the judge noted that she had shown consistent planning before the murder, including removing her child from school on the day it happened. Family members testified, describing a woman prone to wild mood swings. The father recounted how he pleaded with authorities to keep Eli away from Thaler, but his concerns were dismissed. A jury convicted Thaler of first-degree murder. During sentencing, the judge called it one of the worst examples of parental betrayal he had ever seen. When the judge pronounced life without the possibility of parole, Thaler screamed, flipping off the cameras and cursing everyone in the courtroom. Bailiffs subdued her, leading her out as the victim's relatives looked on with tearful relief that justice had been served. News outlets widely covered the meltdown, labeling Thaler the mother who declared war on her child. Critics demanded reforms in child protective services, saying Eli's death was preventable. The father, though devastated, said he hoped the life sentence would remind people to heed warning signs when a parent displays violent or erratic behavior. Thaler remains in a Minnesota prison with no prospect of release, consistently flagged by staff for disruptive conduct. Many see her as a chilling example of a Karen who believed her maternal rights outweighed all logic, culminating in a heart-wrenching murder of an innocent child. To this day, candlelight vigils honor Eli's memory, and local lawmakers continue to push for changes in custody evaluations to avoid another tragedy like this. The case stands as a reminder that the system can fail vulnerable children, especially when it underestimates the danger a parent might pose. For the community, Thaler's meltdown was the final affirmation of her inability to grasp the horror of her crime. In early 2022, Green Bay, Wisconsin made headlines for a gruesome homicide. 25-year-old Taylor Shabiznis strangled and dismembered her boyfriend, 24-year-old Shad Therian, after a drug-fueled night. The details were almost too shocking to read. Police discovered body parts in the home, including a severed head in a bucket. Shabiznis allegedly told investigators she had gone into a rage, strangling Shad with a chain, and then engaging in disturbing acts with his remains. Before the main trial, the court held competency hearings to see if Shabiznis could understand proceedings. Her attorney, Quinn Jolly, announced that a psychological evaluation was ongoing, but things took a turn at a routine hearing when Shabiznis suddenly jumped across the defense table and attacked Jolly. Court security tackled her to the ground. Observers described it as a terrifying outburst, with Shabiznis snarling and attempting to strike him. Trial and evidence. Despite the violence in court, the trial continued. The prosecution laid out the evidence, text messages, photos, and Shabiznis's own recorded admissions. She reportedly said she liked it and would have continued if she hadn't been interrupted. The medical examiner confirmed the cause of death was strangulation. The dismemberment appeared methodical, showing planning. The defense tried to argue she was severely unwell, pointing to her bizarre behavior as proof of insanity. Ultimately, the judge rejected the insanity plea, deeming her responsible for her actions. In a final hearing, he sentenced her to life imprisonment without parole. Shabiznis responded with what some called a Karen meltdown, ranting that she had been misunderstood and was not sorry, in the way people expected. She insisted a demon had taken over her mind, but the judge remained unmoved. In prison, Shabiznis continues to have run-ins with staff. Jail documents suggest she occasionally threatens harm or refuses to follow orders, while some mental health professionals say she needs long-term therapy. The legal system has locked the door on any chance of release. Her now infamous lunge at her attorney remains a stark symbol of her unpredictability. Local media dubbed her meltdown the moment she showed her true self. Video clips circulated online, with viewers labeling her beyond savage. Others debated how her drug use played a role or whether she had an undiagnosed condition. Yet for Shad's family, no explanation could justify the brutality. They spoke at sentencing, describing the emotional horror of losing a gentle young man in such a vile manner. The case triggered renewed debate about how drug-induced psychosis or mental illness intersects with violent crime. Yet the outcome stands. Shabusiness is held fully accountable under Wisconsin law. Her meltdown in court only cemented the image of a defendant who was dangerously erratic, overshadowing any sympathy she might have garnered. For many, this story underlines the darkest extremes of a Karen complex, a self-centered worldview that turns lethal when combined with substance abuse and possible mental instability. In mid-2022, Cleveland, Ohio, witnessed a tragic child neglect case. 29-year-old Crystal Candelario left her 16-month-old daughter, Jaliyah, alone in an apartment for 10 days. She headed off to Puerto Rico for a vacation, later stopping in Detroit. Meanwhile, neighbors in her building heard crying for days, eventually followed by a mysterious silence. By the time someone alerted the police, it was too late. Little Jaliyah was found deceased, severely dehydrated and underweight. A day after discovering the body, detectives tracked down Candelario, who returned to Cleveland. She showed little concern, reportedly telling officers she just needed a break. Prosecutors charged her with aggravated murder and child endangerment. At the arraignment, cameras captured her blank expression as the judge read the charges. Local reporters described it as a Karen-like indifference, as if she couldn't understand the severity of what she had done. Footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera became key evidence. It revealed the baby's frantic cries at odd hours. Eventually stopping altogether, prosecutors played the audio in court, prompting gasps from the gallery. Jaliyah's autopsy found she was left with no food or water. The judge expressed outrage at the callousness. "You abandoned your baby to die while you partied. That is the ultimate betrayal of motherhood." Candelario's defense tried to argue she was depressed and overwhelmed, lacking resources or family support. Her attorney claimed she intended to be gone only for a couple of days, but extended her trip. Candelario did speak at sentencing, sobbing as she asked for forgiveness from the public and her daughter's spirit. "I'm sorry I failed you," she cried, but many doubted her sincerity, seeing it as an attempt to reduce her sentence. Unmoved, the judge sentenced Candelario to life in prison without parole, stating, "I can't imagine a more cruel act than leaving a toddler to suffer alone." The final moment in court saw Candelario collapse in tears, which some believed were for herself, not her child. Family members of the father expressed deep grief, calling the punishment appropriate but still insufficient to bring back Jaliyah. News outlets interviewed angry neighbors who said they had heard the crying, but never imagined the mother had vanished for so long. Some felt guilt for not intervening sooner. Advocacy groups used the case as an example of why communities need to look out for each other's children more carefully. The media portrayed Candelario as a Karen who treated her own child's well-being as less important than a personal vacation. In Cleveland, the memory of Jaliyah haunts those who wonder how a mother could be so self-absorbed. The tragedy spurred local nonprofits to increase awareness around postpartum mental health and single-parent stress. Candelario insisted she never intended harm, but the horrific outcome spoke for itself. Her meltdown in court, pleading for mercy only after the evidence was undeniable, underscored a pattern of selfishness. In the end, no amount of tears changed the fact that she left a helpless toddler to die, and for that, she will spend the rest of her life behind bars. These Karens took entitlement and cruelty to shocking extremes and paid the highest price with life behind bars. Their courtroom outbursts, from wild rants to violent attacks, show how desperation and a twisted sense of self-importance can collide. Philip Chisholm.
Does not want to come into the courtroom.
Philip Chisholm was a quiet 14-year-old high school student in Danvers, Massachusetts. On October 22, 2013, the community was shocked by the brutal murder of 24-year-old math teacher Colleen Ritzer. She was discovered in a wooded area near the school. Students and staff were horrified to learn that a freshman from the very same school was the key suspect. Colleen Ritzer was known for her enthusiasm and kindness. That day, she asked Chisholm to stay after school to discuss a missed homework assignment. Security footage later showed Chisholm walking the halls behind her. This simple after-school meeting turned into a nightmare that ended with Ritzer's life cut short. Investigators found evidence suggesting Chisholm had planned the murder. He brought a box cutter, gloves, and a change of clothes to school that morning. According to prosecutors, he followed Ritzer into a bathroom and attacked her there, using the box cutter to inflict fatal wounds. He then put her body into a recycling bin, wheeling it outside to a wooded area behind the school. It was a chilling act, showing more organization than anyone would expect from a child. Afterward, Chisholm tried to cover his tracks. He took Ritzer's wallet and other personal items, leaving a scene of chaos and sorrow. Police found him early the next morning. He still had traces of blood on his hands and clothing. The arrest sent shockwaves through the small town. How could a 14-year-old commit such a terrible crime? The trial began with questions about Chisholm's mental state. His lawyers argued that he suffered from a severe mental illness, suggesting he might not have fully understood his actions. Yet the prosecution highlighted the calculated steps he took, buying items in advance, using the recycling bin to hide the body, and attempting to flee. Victim impact statements showed Colleen Ritzer's family's immeasurable grief. Her father spoke about losing his beloved daughter and the life she never got to lead. Students and friends described a teacher who had once been their source of happiness and inspiration. Seeing a 14-year-old suspect in shackles during proceedings was deeply unsettling. Throughout the trial, Philip Chisholm displayed an eerie calm. He rarely spoke. When he did, it was brief and matter-of-fact. Many onlookers wondered if he felt any remorse, or if he was fully disconnected from the reality of what he had done. Some experts suggested he might have been disassociating or experiencing a mental health crisis. Others believed he was simply cold and unrepentant. In 2016, the judge sentenced Chisholm to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Massachusetts law protects juveniles from a traditional life without parole sentence. The judge emphasized the brutality of the act, calling it one of the most horrifying cases the court had seen. The Ritzer family, however, insisted no sentence could ever ease their grief. During sentencing, Chisholm's face remained blank. He did not speak an apology. The family stared at him, tears in their eyes, but he offered no reaction. Many people in the community argued that someone capable of such a crime should never walk free. Others noted his young age, suggesting he might someday change. Danvers High School established new security measures and offered counseling to students and teachers. Colleen Ritzer's name lives on through scholarships and memorials that honor her passion for teaching. Her family still wonders what caused a quiet, athletic teen to become a killer that fateful afternoon. Though Chisholm is eligible for parole in decades, the Ritzer family has firmly stated they will attend every parole hearing to remind the court of Colleen's life and the violent acts he committed. Even as time passes, the town of Danvers remains haunted by the day a respected young teacher lost her life to a 14-year-old student. Brandon Spencer.
Out in court today, banging his head on a table after a judge sentenced him to life in prison.
On October 31st, 2012, a busy Halloween party at the University of Southern California campus turned into a scene of terror when gunshots rang out. Brandon Spencer, then 19 years old, had brought a firearm to the crowded event, allegedly targeting a rival gang member. 4 people were shot and injured, but fortunately, none were killed. As students fled, the Los Angeles Police Department launched a massive investigation. Detectives quickly identified Spencer, who was said to be a known gang member. Spencer did not hide his frustration or fear. Within days, he was in custody, facing 4 counts of attempted murder. His family insisted he was misunderstood or wrongly identified. The prosecution, however, painted a very different picture. According to the district attorney's office, the shooting was gang-related. Witness statements describe Spencer confronting a rival. In a matter of seconds, multiple shots were fired into the crowd, leaving 4 bystanders with bullet wounds. Some students dove under tables while others sprinted across the courtyard to find safety. Spencer's defense team tried to argue that there was confusion in the chaos, and no conclusive evidence linked him to the gun that caused the injuries. They also stated that he had no intent to kill. It was all a mistake, born from a heated argument. But the prosecution brought forward forensic details, phone records, and eyewitness accounts that seemed to point squarely at Spencer. The trial saw highly emotional testimony from the shooting survivors. Some were students who had only wanted to enjoy a Halloween party. They recounted the sudden panic, the pain of bullet wounds, and the lasting trauma. As they took the stand, Spencer watched quietly, wearing a formal shirt and tie, but tension filled the courtroom air. Prosecutors hammered home that Spencer showed no concern for others' lives and that firing a weapon in a crowd was a deliberate act. The defense tried to humanize him, highlighting his youth potential and struggles in a tough neighborhood. The jury was left with the question, should the circumstances of his life reduce his blame for almost killing 4 people? When the jury found Spencer guilty on all 4 counts of attempted murder, the courtroom braced for the sentencing. The judge, unmoved by the defense's plea for a lighter punishment, sentenced Spencer to 40 years to life in prison. The moment Spencer heard the words 40 years, he erupted, shouting and swearing. He tried to stand up but was immediately restrained by deputies. The outburst stunned observers who later said they had rarely seen such a raw reaction to a sentence. Spencer continued to protest, yelling that he was innocent and had been set up by the system. Family members in the gallery also cried out, insisting that justice had not been served. It took several minutes for bailiffs to calm the chaos in the courtroom. For the victims, the sentencing brought some relief, but also lingering pain. Their physical and emotional scars remained. Some had dropped out of college for a semester or more to recover. Meanwhile, Spencer's relatives denounced the gang label, insisting he never intended to injure innocent people. They blamed flawed policing and harsh sentencing laws. The case drew attention to gun violence involving young adults. Many questioned how a 19-year-old acquired a firearm and why such deep gang rivalries existed. Spencer's meltdown in court became a symbol of the desperation many young offenders feel when they see a large chunk of their lives vanish with the slam of a judge's gavel. Brandon Spencer will be eligible for parole in a few decades, but under California law, that freedom is far from guaranteed. For the survivors and their loved ones, that Halloween nightmare continues to cast a shadow, reminding everyone that a single gunshot can rewrite countless lives. Conrad Schaefer.
And gave him life. Let's take you inside the Osceola County Courthouse where this hearing began shortly after 9 and ended a short while ago.
In Osceola County, Florida, the summer of 2013 was marred by random shootings that left communities on edge. Homes were hit by bullets, cars were damaged, and fear grew daily. Local teens whispered rumors about a 15-year-old named Conrad Schaefer, who bragged about having a .45 caliber carbine his father had bought him. Still, nobody imagined he would escalate to taking lives. But within 2 weeks, the random shootings turned deadly. 2 young men, 17-year-old David Guerrero on his way to work and 22-year-old Eric R. at home, were killed. The entire county was shaken. People locked doors and windows, unable to fathom why a teen would roam neighborhoods at night, opening fire. Police scrambled for leads, not suspecting a group of minors. Schaefer didn't act alone. He teamed up with 3 friends, David Damas, Victoria Rios, and Juan Muriel. One burglary spiraled into homicide when the group invaded Eric R.'s home. The victims had no chance to fight back, with bullets fired as soon as they saw movement. Investigators later discovered that Schaefer kept score of his shots, treating real life like a video game. Over 22 shootings were tied to these teens in just a couple of weeks. Houses bore bullet holes, and many families cowered in fear at sundown. The group seemed to pick targets randomly, which made the spree even more terrifying. They also robbed victims, taking cash or valuables before fleeing into the night. Detectives connected the bullets to a .45 caliber carbine, a weapon Schaefer's father had purchased. Someone from the neighborhood who suspected strange behavior tipped off officers. Schaefer was questioned and confessed to certain details, including how he convinced his father to buy ammunition. Police were stunned by Schaefer's lack of remorse. In further interrogations, he reportedly spoke in a calm, chilling tone, as if describing a normal weekend activity. Law enforcement executed searches of the teenagers' homes, uncovering stolen items and more ammunition. In the living room of Schaefer's residence, they found references to violent gaming and drawings that pointed to a fascination with guns. Community members asked how a 15-year-old could maintain such secrecy about his deadly pastime. As prosecutors laid out the charges, 2 counts of first-degree murder, among others, the families of David Guerrero and Eric R. filled the seats wanting justice. They heard how these teens roam neighborhoods, randomly firing at anyone who crossed their path. Tension was high during testimony about the final moments of the victims' lives. Schaefer's attorney tried to argue that he came from a troubled background, or that peer pressure played a role. The prosecution, however, insisted on portraying him as the ringleader. They played a video of his confession showing him describing the shootings with little emotion. This display outraged the victims' families, who shouted that no apology could bring back their loved ones. At sentencing, Schaefer briefly addressed the court. He muttered a short apology. "I'm sorry for everything I did. I know it was wrong." Relatives of the victims said they refused to believe his remorse. The judge, in turn, delivered 2 consecutive life sentences. He pointed out that if Schaefer had been 18, the state might have sought the death penalty. Schaefer barely reacted. Some attendees said he simply stared ahead. Schaefer's accomplices also faced lengthy prison terms, though none as harsh as his. Victoria Rios, for instance, was convicted of lesser offenses tied to the burglaries and ended up with decades behind bars. The entire spree became a stark reminder of how quickly a bored, disturbed teen can turn to extreme violence. Residents of Osceola County still struggle with the memory of those violent weeks. Many continue to ask if earlier intervention, perhaps in school or at home, could have stopped Schaefer from turning a father's misguided gun purchase into a deadly rampage. The case remains an example of how a teen's fascination with weapons, combined with easy access, can lead to unthinkable tragedy.
Begin this half hour with the so-called hiccup girl, Jennifer Mee, speaking out in her first national interview since being arrested in connection with
worldwide attention back in 2007 for her uncontrollable hiccuping.
Jennifer Mee. Jennifer Mee gained sudden fame at age 15 when she suffered from an uncontrollable bout of hiccups.
Every time I walked into school, oh, there goes the hiccup girl. Oh, look at Jennifer. Let's be friends with her.
Sometimes reaching 50 hiccups a minute. She appeared on TV talk shows, drawing public sympathy and curiosity. Over time, her hiccups subsided. The spotlight faded. Then, in 2010, Mee found a new kind of notoriety when she was arrested for murder at 19. Investigators said Mee lured a 22-year-old man she met online to a vacant house with the help of her boyfriend, Lamont Newton, and another friend, Laren Rayford. The plan was robbery, but the confrontation turned violent and the victim was shot dead. Police charged all 3 with first-degree murder, stating that the group only got away with about $50. Mee set up the victim, telling him to come over late at night. When he arrived, Newton and Rayford were waiting. They confronted him at gunpoint, aiming to rob him. Tension spiked and gunfire erupted. In the confusion, the victim sustained a fatal wound and the 3 fled. The murder shocked the city. That same hiccup girl, who once captured hearts, was now behind bars. Mee later claimed she never intended for the victim to die and that she was under the control of her boyfriend. However, phone records and a video confession suggested otherwise. Text messages showed she orchestrated the meetup, knew a gun was involved, and even discussed how they would split the money. During the trial, the most striking evidence was a recorded jail phone call between Mee and her mother. On the call, her mother asked in shock, "Who did you kill?" Mee answered that she hadn't killed anyone herself, but something had gone wrong. This recording played in court, showing that Mee realized the gravity of the crime, yet tried to downplay her role. Prosecutors used Florida's felony murder rule. If you assist in a felony, like robbery, that leads to someone's death, you can be charged with murder, whether or not you pulled the trigger. The victim's family attended every hearing, clearly furious at the casual tone Mee sometimes displayed. They felt her earlier media fame was irrelevant. To them, she was simply an adult responsible for a man's death. Observers noted Mee's lack of overt remorse. She occasionally looked upset, but mostly wore a flat expression. During victim impact statements, family members described the heartbreaking loss. They called Mee cold-hearted for luring a stranger with false promises. Mee did not speak at length, but her short statements offered no genuine apology, only a claim that she never expected murder to happen. When the guilty verdict came, Mee's face paled, but she did not break down. Some reporters recalled that in earlier interviews about her hiccups, she had shown more anxiety than she did about facing a first-degree murder charge. Florida law is strict with felony murder. Mee received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Her co-defendants, Newton and Rayford, got the same. The victim's relatives expressed relief that the killers would not walk free. Mee's mother tearfully said it was all a tragic mistake. Jennifer was just a troubled girl seeking attention and falling in with the wrong crowd. This case serves as a reminder that even those who don't pull the trigger can face a life sentence if they set the crime in motion. Hiccup Girl quickly became a grim tagline for news outlets. People who once felt sympathy for her unusual medical condition now saw a manipulative side that ended a young man's life. While Me and her accomplices remain behind bars, her story endures as a warning about how fleeting fame can twist into something dark. The victim's family has stayed vocal about the need for caution when meeting strangers online. They hope others will learn from their painful experience. Me's name resurfaces in media from time to time, but always tied to a single question. How did a girl once known for an odd health condition throw her life away for a $50 robbery gone wrong?
Impact of a patrol hearing today for Alyssa Bustamante.
Alyssa Bustamante was 15 in 2009, living in St. Martin's, Missouri with her grandparents. Friends and neighbors described her as quiet, but some saw her social media posts filled with dark themes, references to depression, and even passing mentions of harming herself or others. Despite these warning signs, few expected her to commit an unthinkable act. On October 21st, 2009, 9-year-old Elizabeth Olton, who lived just a few houses down from Alyssa, vanished. Panic spread through the community. Over 2 days, the police and volunteers searched every inch of the area, calling her name. Suspicion soon fell on Alyssa, who had been seen near the woods where Elizabeth might have gone. Investigators learned Alyssa had invited Elizabeth to play, then lured her into a wooded area behind the house. Once they were alone, Alyssa attacked the little girl, strangling her, stabbing her, and finally cutting her throat. The brutality stunned even seasoned detectives. But what made it worse was that Alyssa had prepared a grave beforehand. After Elizabeth's body was discovered in that shallow grave, authorities brought Alyssa in for questioning. She eventually confessed. The motive was as shocking as the crime. She told them she just wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. She described it as a thrill. This statement chilled the entire community. During a search of Alyssa's bedroom, police found a diary. Parts of it were written in ink invisible to the naked eye, so investigators used special lighting to read it. In one entry, Alyssa described how amazing it felt to murder someone and how she wished she could do it again. This diary entry became key evidence in the case, showing her mental state and apparent pride in taking a life. Charged as an adult, Alyssa faced first-degree murder. The courtroom was tense. Elizabeth's family openly glared at Alyssa, while her defense team argued she had severe mental health issues and a traumatic childhood. They said she had attempted suicide multiple times, showing deeper psychological problems. The prosecution, on the other hand, focused on how planned and ruthless the killing was, emphasizing the pre-dug grave and the disturbing diary entry. During testimony, Alyssa often sat quietly, expression blank. Her short figure and babyish face contrasted sharply with the horror of her actions. Observers wondered how a teen could appear so emotionless after doing something so violent. Elizabeth's mother described the constant nightmares, the empty bedroom at home, and the hole in her heart that would never heal. Before the trial fully unfolded, Alyssa took a plea deal in 2012. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, avoiding the possibility of life without parole. The judge sentenced her to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years, plus a consecutive 30-year term for armed criminal action. Essentially, she has the potential for release in the distant future. At the sentencing, Alyssa finally spoke, offering a short apology. She said she understood the pain she caused, but felt it was too late to fix anything. Elizabeth's family called her words hollow, stating no apology could mend their suffering or restore their innocent child's life. For many in Missouri, this case ignited debates on whether juveniles who commit extreme crimes should be locked away for life. Psychologists pointed to the importance of early intervention for troubled teens. Elizabeth's family tried to move forward, though the memory of that day lingers in the small community. Alyssa Bustamante remains behind bars, serving a lengthy sentence. Some believe she is simply evil. Others see her as a deeply disturbed child who who slipped through the cracks. Either way, her story remains a warning of what can happen when ominous signs and cries for help go unnoticed or unaddressed. The sweet, shy girl next door can hide a darkness far deeper than anyone imagines. Nicholas Cruz.
You see, all those video evidence that was shown in this courtroom, we didn't see it.
My name is Nick. I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018.
On February 14, 2018, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, became the site of one of the deadliest high school shootings in U.S. history. 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz, a former student, walked onto campus with a legally purchased AR-15 rifle. For minutes, he fired dozens of rounds, killing 17 people, 14 students and 3 staff, and injuring 17 more. The tragedy sent shockwaves worldwide. Students described hearing loud pops and believing it was a drill, only to realize the horror when classmates fell to the floor, wounded or dead. Some hid in closets or behind desks. Teachers risked their lives to shield students. The entire nation watched, heartbroken, as news outlets covered the chaos live from the scene. Cruz had a documented history of emotional and behavioral issues. He had been expelled from the school previously. Police visited his home numerous times due to domestic disputes or concerns about his violent social media posts. Many asked why he was still able to buy a high-powered rifle at age 18 in Florida. The morning of the shooting, Cruz arrived by Uber carrying a large bag. Once inside the building, he pulled the rifle out and began firing indiscriminately. Surveillance cameras recorded his path through the halls, and phone videos from terrified students captured the relentless gunshots. Cruz fled with other escaping students but was arrested about an hour later without incident. Cruz was charged with 17 counts of premeditated first-degree murder and 17 counts of attempted murder. When the case reached court, there was a broad debate about the death penalty. Families of the victims expressed anger at any possibility of mercy. Cruz's defense claimed he suffered from mental health disorders and that life in prison was a more appropriate sentence. Cruz pleaded guilty to all charges, effectively admitting responsibility. Throughout the trial, victim impact statements shook the courtroom. Parents and siblings spoke of bright futures stolen and of daily heartbreak. Teachers described the guilt and trauma they still carry. Cruz often sat with a blank expression, sometimes displaying twitchy or odd behaviors. At moments, he even let out small smiles or laughs, enraging grieving families who saw it as evidence of no remorse. Florida law requires a unanimous jury recommendation for a death sentence. In Cruz's case, the jury split. A few jurors felt mitigating circumstances, such as mental health, should spare him from capital punishment. Because the recommendation wasn't unanimous, the judge was compelled to sentence Cruz to life without parole for each murder. Emotions exploded. Families who had begged for the death penalty saw Cruz's life sentence as a crushing blow. In the final hearing, many of them addressed Cruz directly, calling him a coward, monster, and far worse. One father said he hoped Cruz would endure a lifetime of isolation in prison, never to see freedom again. For much of the sentencing hearing, Cruz stared downward. He uttered a broad apology, claiming he wished to help others if given another chance. This fell flat for the grieving families. They called his apology hollow, pointing out that his laughter in earlier sessions showed his true nature. The judge, clearly disturbed by the details of the shooting, simply followed the law in handing down life imprisonment, leaving Cruz to spend the rest of his days behind bars. This case reignited debates about gun control, mental health services, and the readiness of society to spot warning signs. Survivors formed activist movements like March for Our Lives, pushing for changes in legislation. The name Nicholas Cruz remains synonymous with one of the darkest moments in modern school history, and his sentencing serves as a reminder that even teen or young adult offenders can inflict trauma on a scale few can comprehend. Danta Wright.
Keon, I love my family.
That's all you got to say.
I no longer have the hope of having grandchildren. I've lost the enjoyment of holidays and birthdays and of everyday life.
18-year-old Dante Wright from Ann Arbor, Michigan, was known to have dabbled in petty crime and had a reputation on the streets. But no one expected the murder of Jordan Clee, a standout high school athlete, to be the outcome of a simple robbery plan. Klee was respected for his sports talent and had hopes of playing college ball one day. On an evening in 2013, Wright and a couple of associates set out to rob Klee, reportedly seeking drugs, clothes, and shoes. At some point, Klee resisted their demands and a scuffle began. Wright, armed with a gun, fired a shot that struck Klee in the back of the head, ending the young athlete's life instantly. The shocking crime left Klee's family devastated and the community stunned. Police arrived at a scene of chaos, Klee lying on the ground, unresponsive. Witnesses described seeing a young man fleeing. Tips soon poured in, pointing to Wright as the one responsible. Investigators found bullet casings at the scene and matched them to a weapon that was later traced to Wright through ballistics. Within days, the Ann Arbor Police Department had enough evidence to charge him with murder. Wright's arrest brought mixed reactions. His friends claimed he was just a kid from a tough neighborhood who made a fatal mistake, but Klee's family argued that calling an adult with a gun a kid was an insult to their murdered son. Emotions ran high as the case moved toward trial. During the trial, prosecutors laid out the details of the robbery plan. They insisted Wright knew exactly what he was doing. They revealed text messages in which Wright bragged about getting gear and cash, showing no concern for potential harm. The defense tried to argue that the shooting was not premeditated, saying Wright only intended to scare Klee, not kill him. Witnesses testified that Klee was pleading for them to take what they wanted and let him go, yet the shot still rang out. A forensic analyst described how the bullet's trajectory confirmed Klee was attempting to turn away. This detail underlined how unnecessary the violence was. Family members gave emotional victim impact statements, describing Jordan as a kind, promising young man. They read personal letters, choked back tears, and asked how an 18-year-old could be so callous. The judge allowed them to speak at length, giving them a chance to share their heartbreak. Wright, however, showed little reaction. Reports stated he chuckled under his breath at points, drawing the judge's stern gaze. At one moment, while a family member tearfully spoke, he turned to a deputy and rolled his eyes. Such behavior outraged the courtroom. Klee's relatives called him a monster and soulless. The judge considered not accepting the sentencing agreement because of Wright's casual attitude. He threatened to take the case to trial on felony murder, which could lead to a mandatory life without parole. Wright's defense team quickly urged him to remain calm, realizing the seriousness of the judge's warning. In the end, the judge agreed to proceed with the negotiated plea. The final sentence was 25 to 52 years in prison, a range that means Wright could remain incarcerated into his middle age. Upon hearing the details, Wright smirked again before adopting a blank expression. After sentencing, Klee's mother stated that no punishment felt sufficient as her son's promising life was stolen. She said she would attend every parole hearing to oppose Wright's release. The case highlighted broader problems: a culture of youth violence, easy access to firearms, and the consequences of impulsive decisions. Ann Arbor held a candlelight vigil for Jordan, with friends and family sharing stories about his sports achievements and dreams. They hoped the tragedy would push more mentoring programs for at-risk teens. Meanwhile, Daunte Wright joined the ranks of teenagers spending much of their lives in a cell for a moment of deadly choice. These 7 stories reveal how a single violent act can define a young life forever and shatter families. From silent courtrooms to explosive outbursts, each case shows the raw consequences when teenagers commit horrifying crimes. Jamarian Lawhorn. On August 4th, 2014, a crime that seemed incomprehensible rocked the city of Kentwood, Michigan. Jamarian Lawhorn, just 12 years old, fatally stabbed 9-year-old Connor Verkerka in a playground. Connor was playing with his younger brother and a group of children when Jamarian approached, brandishing a kitchen knife he had taken from his home. Without warning or provocation, he attacked Connor, stabbing him multiple times in the back. Connor managed to run home, collapsing on his front porch as his younger brother screamed for help. Despite his parents' desperate efforts to save him, Connor tragically succumbed to his injuries. The crime was chilling not only for its brutality, but also for its apparent randomness. Jamarian and Connor did not know each other. As the details of the case unfolded, it became evident that the motive behind the act was rooted in Jamarian's harrowing personal circumstances. Raised in a household rife with abuse and neglect, Jamarian had endured years of physical and emotional trauma. his mother and stepfather frequently beat him, leaving him with a deep sense of despair and isolation. When questioned, Jamarian made a startling confession. He had murdered because he wanted to be arrested and taken away from his abusive home. "I wanted someone to take me away from my dad," he told investigators. This tragic statement highlighted the extreme lengths to which a child, consumed by hopelessness, might go to escape a life of suffering. The courtroom trial for Jamarian Lawhorn was a deeply emotional and complex affair. At the center was a 12-year-old boy who had committed a heinous act, but whose life had been marked by relentless abuse. Initially, Jamarian appeared calm and detached during the proceedings, an unsettling contrast to the raw grief displayed by Connor Verkerk's family. As testimony about his upbringing was presented, however, Jamarian's demeanor began to shift. Witnesses recounted the beatings and neglect he had suffered at the hands of his mother and stepfather. One of the most poignant moments came when Jamarian's mother testified. She admitted to regularly hitting her son and acknowledged that his stepfather had been violent as well. Her words painted a picture of a household steeped in dysfunction, where Jamarian's cries for help went unheard. Connor's family, meanwhile, was resolute in their demand for justice. Their heartbreaking testimonies about Connor's life and the void left by his death added an overwhelming weight to the trial. Connor's father, overcome with emotion, pleaded for the court to hold Jamarian accountable, describing the unimaginable pain their family had endured. The most striking moment of the trial came during sentencing. Jamarian, who had maintained a stoic facade throughout much of the proceedings, finally broke down in tears. The reality of his actions and the impact they had on both families seemed to fully sink in. It was a haunting moment that captured the profound tragedy of the case. A young boy who had caused immeasurable pain to escape his suffering. Given Jamarian Lawhorn's age and the circumstances surrounding the crime, the court faced a difficult decision. He was convicted of first-degree murder, but sentenced to a juvenile facility until the age of 21, with a focus on rehabilitation. The sentence acknowledged the severity of his crime, while also addressing the underlying issues of abuse and neglect that had shaped his actions. Jamarian was placed in a highly structured environment, where he received therapy and counseling to address his trauma. Reports from the facility have noted his active participation in these programs, as well as his progress in academics and behavior. Despite the progress, questions remain about whether the intervention came too late. Nathaniel Jouet. On August 28, 2017, the quiet town of Clovis, New Mexico, was shattered by an unthinkable act of violence. Nathaniel Jouet, a 16-year-old high school sophomore, entered the Clovis Carver Public Library armed with 2 handguns. What followed was a senseless and devastating attack that left 2 people dead and 4 others injured. The victims included library employees and patrons who had been going about their day in what should have been a safe space. Jouet's attack was fueled by deep emotional struggles. In the months leading up to the shooting, he had been battling severe depression and suicidal thoughts. Witnesses later described how he had expressed feelings of hopelessness and anger, even discussing his desire to die by suicide by cop. According to Jouet's statements, he initially intended to take his own life, but instead decided to target others in what he described as a moment of blind rage. During the rampage, Jouet showed no hesitation. He opened fire indiscriminately, killing 2 librarians, Wanda Walters and Christina Carter, and injuring 4 others. The library quickly became a scene of chaos as patrons scrambled to escape the gunfire. First responders arrived within minutes, apprehending Jouet without further incident. The attack left a profound impact on the Clovis community, which struggled to reconcile the violent act with the image of a young man many described as polite and soft-spoken. Jouet's classmates and teachers expressed shock, recounting how he had been involved in church activities and seemed to be seeking help for his struggles. However, beneath this exterior was a teenager grappling with untreated mental health issues, which ultimately culminated in tragedy. The trial of Nathaniel Jouet was marked by raw emotion and difficult questions about accountability. Jouet, who had pleaded guilty to the charges against him, faced the victims' families and the community in a packed courtroom. In a tearful statement during sentencing, Jouet expressed deep remorse for his actions.
I can't imagine what some of you have gone through and continue to go through. Everyone who made a statement and showed up, I want to thank you, because I know that was hard for you to do.
The courtroom audience had mixed reactions to Jouet's apology. Some family members of the victims found his words hollow, stating that no apology could ever bring back their loved ones. Others acknowledged his remorse, but felt it did not excuse the devastating consequences of his actions. Perhaps the most poignant moment came when the mother of one of the deceased librarians spoke directly to Jouet. Through tears, she told him, "You took my daughter, and you took my best friend. I hope you think about that every day for the rest of your life." Jouet listened intently, his face a mixture of guilt and anguish. The emotional weight of the trial was compounded by testimony about Jouet's mental state leading up to the attack. His defense attorneys argued that his severe depression and lack of adequate mental health care played a significant role in the tragedy. Prosecutors, however, maintained that regardless of his struggles, he had made a choice to commit a premeditated act of violence and should be held fully accountable. Nathaniel Jouet was convicted of multiple charges, including 2 counts of first-degree murder, 4 counts of aggravated battery, and tampering with evidence. The judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life sentences, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, he received 40 years for the aggravated battery charges, underscoring the gravity of his actions. The sentencing brought a sense of closure to some, but for others, it raised lingering questions about how such tragedies could be prevented. Jouet's case highlighted the devastating consequences of untreated mental health issues in teenagers. Many wondered if earlier intervention or more robust mental health resources could have saved lives that day, including Jouet's. Nathan Pape. On September 17, 2012, a heinous crime shocked the small community of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Nathan Pape, 13, and his friend Antonio Barbeau, 13, brutally murdered Barbeau's great-grandmother, 78-year-old Barbara Olson, in her own home. The 2 teens devised the plan to kill Olson in the hopes of stealing money to fund their escapades. The murder was premeditated and shockingly calculated. The boys armed themselves with a hatchet and a hammer, entering Olson's house under the guise of a friendly visit. Once inside, they attacked Olson mercilessly, striking her multiple times with the weapons. After ensuring she was dead, the pair stole loose change, a small amount of cash, and her jewelry. To cover their tracks, Pape and Barbeau attempted to stage the scene to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. They loaded the stolen items into Olson's car and dumped the vehicle in a nearby parking lot. However, their plan quickly unraveled when Barbeau's family became suspicious of his behavior and called the police. Within days, both boys confessed to the crime, and the community was left grappling with the shocking reality of their actions. The senselessness of the murder, killing a beloved elderly woman for such a trivial gain, brought intense scrutiny to the case. It also raised difficult questions about the influence of peer pressure, the capacity for violence in young teens, and how the justice system should handle juvenile offenders who commit such horrific acts. The trial of Nathan Pape was marked by visible regret and emotional displays in the courtroom. While Antonio Barbeau appeared cold and detached throughout much of the proceedings, Pape's demeanor was starkly different. He often appeared overwhelmed, his face etched with guilt and sorrow. During his testimony, Pape expressed deep remorse for his actions. His voice broke as he described how he had followed Barbeau's lead, claiming that he never intended for the plan to end in murder. Testimonies from Olson's family members added to the emotional weight of the trial. Her relatives described her as a kind and loving woman who had always gone out of her way to help others, including her great-grandson. They expressed disbelief and anger that such a violent act could come from two boys so young. Pop's visible regret stood in contrast to Barbeau's chilling lack of emotion. Prosecutors argued that while Pop may have been influenced by Barbeau, he still played an active role in the crime and should be held fully accountable. The defense, however, pointed to his young age and impressionability, suggesting that he was a follower rather than a leader. Despite his remorse, Nathan Pape was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide. Under Wisconsin law, juveniles charged with such a crime are automatically tried as adults. The judge sentenced Pap to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. This meant he would not be eligible for release until he was in his mid-40s, a prospect that underscored the gravity of his actions. During the sentencing, the judge acknowledged Papi's apparent regret, but emphasized the seriousness of the crime. "You made a choice, Nathan," the judge said, and that choice had devastating consequences. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read, with many reflecting on the tragic waste of both Olson's life. Pape's case has since become a focal point in discussions about peer pressure and accountability in juvenile offenders. Experts analyzing the case noted how Pape's willingness to follow Barbeau's lead demonstrated the dangers of group dynamics, particularly among impressionable teens. While Pape expressed regret and remorse, the fact remained that he actively participated in the brutal murder. Kyle Anger. On October 18, 2017, a group of 5 teens in Michigan turned a seemingly harmless prank into a deadly tragedy. Kyle Anger, 17, Mickaden Payne, 16, Trevor Gray, 15, Alexander Miller, 15, and Mark Sikelski, 15, gathered on an overpass on Interstate 75 near Flint, Michigan. They began throwing rocks at passing vehicles, a reckless act they saw as a prank. The situation escalated when Kyle Anger hurled a 6-pound rock that crashed through the windshield of a van, striking 32-year-old Kenneth White in the chest and head. White, who was riding home from work, died instantly from blunt force trauma. The vehicle's driver pulled over and called 911, but it was too late. White's death left his fiancée and their young child devastated, and the senseless nature of the crime sent shockwaves through the local community. Investigators quickly linked the teens to the incident thanks to witnesses and evidence at the scene. The group was arrested the following day and confessed to their actions. Authorities discovered that the teens had thrown over 20 objects from the overpass that evening, including a tire and other debris. While they claimed they didn't intend to harm anyone, the gravity of their actions was undeniable. The case highlighted the consequences of youthful recklessness and the devastating impact such behavior can have on innocent lives. Kenneth White's family, in particular, struggled to comprehend how a group of teenagers could engage in such a dangerous act without considering the potential consequences. The courtroom proceedings were emotionally charged as the teens faced charges of second-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and malicious destruction of property. Their ages and the nature of the crime sparked debates about whether they should be tried as adults or juveniles. During the trial, the teens displayed a range of emotions. Kyle Anger, identified as the one who threw the fatal rock, appeared visibly shaken and remorseful. In a statement during sentencing, he broke down in tears, saying,
In time, I can only hope that Mr. White's family and the community will be able to forgive me for my actions.
His words, however, offered little solace to Kenneth White's grieving family. White's fiancée, Amy Cagle, delivered a heartbreaking victim impact statement. Through tears, she described the pain of losing her partner and the challenges of raising their child without him.
Tell my son that his daddy was gone and wouldn't be coming home. When I broke the news to my son, he didn't understand. In his mind, doctors could fix his daddy.
The courtroom also heard from the families of the teens, who expressed disbelief and sorrow over the tragedy. The parents of Kyle Anger and his co-defendants pleaded for leniency, arguing that their children's actions were thoughtless but not malicious. Their emotional testimonies underscored the dual tragedy of the case: the loss of an innocent life and the ruined futures of 5 young boys. The prosecution emphasized the recklessness of the teens' actions, particularly Kyle Anger's decision to throw the heaviest rock. They argued that the teens knew their actions were dangerous and continued regardless. Defense attorneys countered by pointing to the teens' immaturity and lack of understanding about the potential consequences of their actions. In the end, the court handed down varied sentences based on the teens' levels of involvement. Kyle Anger, being the oldest and the one who threw the fatal rock, received the harshest sentence of 39 months to 20 years in prison. The other 4 teens, who played supporting roles, were sentenced to probation and mandatory community service, with the possibility of expunging their records if they completed their sentences without further incidents. The sentencing sparked mixed reactions. Kenneth White's family expressed frustration, feeling that justice had not been fully served. Kyle gets to go home one day. Meanwhile, advocates for juvenile justice reform viewed the sentences for the younger teens as appropriate, emphasizing the need for rehabilitation rather than punishment for minors. Rachel Schoaf and Shelia Eddy. The shocking murder of Skylar Neese by her best friends, Rachel Schoaf and Shelia Eddy, rocked the small town of Star City, West Virginia. On the surface, the 3 girls appeared inseparable, sharing a tight bond as they navigated the challenges of high school. However, beneath this facade, tensions simmered, ultimately culminating in betrayal and tragedy. On the night of July 5, 2012, Rachel and Shelia lured 16-year-old Skylar out of her home under the pretense of a late-night drive. They picked her up, drove her to a remote area in Pennsylvania, and, without warning, attacked her. Skylar fought desperately for her life, but the 2 girls overpowered her, stabbing her repeatedly. Her last words, reportedly, were a plea. Why? The motive behind the murder remains chillingly trivial. Rachel later confessed that the pair simply didn't want to be friends with Skylar anymore. Their decision to kill her, rather than drift apart naturally, stunned investigators and the community alike. After disposing of Skylar's body and attempting to cover their tracks, the girls returned home, continuing with their lives as though nothing had happened. For months, Shelia played the role of the grieving friend, posting heartfelt messages about Skylar on social media, and even helping with search efforts. Rachel, however, struggled to maintain the charade. Her growing guilt eventually led to a full confession in January 2013, which solved the truth about the murder. Rachel's admission not only shocked the Neese family, but also exposed Shelia's cold and calculated involvement. The courtroom proceedings were emotionally charged as Rachel Schoaf and Shelia Eddy faced justice for their roles in Skylar's murder. Rachel's demeanor during the trial contrasted sharply with Shelia's. While Rachel appeared remorseful, often breaking down in tears, Shelia remained stoic and unrepentant, her cold demeanor unsettling those in attendance. In a powerful moment during the trial, Rachel tearfully admitted to her actions. Her emotional confession, though heartbreaking, did little to ease the pain of Skylar's parents, who viewed her as equally culpable. Skylar's father, Dave Neese, delivered a gut-wrenching victim impact statement. Addressing the court, he said, "You can never understand the pain of burying your child."
Soph is going to go through her life manipulating and lying her way in and out of trouble. And this time she did something she can't take back.
His words highlighted the profound grief and betrayal the Neese family endured. Rachel Schoaf and Shelia Eddy were both charged with first-degree murder. In exchange for her cooperation and confession, Rachel received a plea deal, resulting in a sentence of 30 years in prison. Shelia, who did not cooperate with authorities, received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The sentencing brought a measure of closure to Skylar's family, but the pain of their loss remains. "Justice was served," said Dave Neese, "but nothing will bring Skylar back." The Neese family has since dedicated themselves to advocating for victims' rights and raising awareness about teen violence. The case sparked widespread discussion about the capacity for remorse in young killers, while Rachel's emotional breakdown and confession suggested a level of guilt. Shalia's cold indifference left many questioning whether she truly understood the gravity of her actions. Psychologists analyzing the case pointed to the role of peer pressure and the lack of emotional maturity in understanding consequences. Martise Fuller. In May 2019, Martise Fuller, a 15-year-old high school sophomore in Kenosha, Wisconsin, fatally shot his ex-girlfriend, Kaylee Juga. The crime shocked the local community, highlighting the tragic consequences of unresolved personal conflicts and controlling behavior in teenage relationships. Fuller and Kaylee had dated for over a year before their relationship became tumultuous. Friends and family reported that Fuller exhibited controlling tendencies, often demanding to know Kaylee's whereabouts and attempting to isolate her from her social circle. As tensions escalated, Kaylee ended the relationship, but Fuller struggled to accept her decision. On the day of the murder, Fuller entered the Juga family home armed with a stolen gun. He shot Kaylee multiple times in her bedroom before firing at her mother, who survived but suffered serious injuries. Fuller fled the scene, sparking a manhunt that ended with his arrest the next day. The crime was both premeditated and personal, driven by Fuller's inability to cope with rejection, with the courtroom filled with supporters of Kaylee's family. Throughout the proceedings, Fuller maintained a stoic demeanor, showing little visible emotion as the prosecution detailed the events leading up to the murder. His lack of remorse, particularly in contrast to the overwhelming grief expressed by the Juga family, left a chilling impression on those present. The trial included heartbreaking testimonies from Kaylee's parents. Her father, in a tearful statement, recounted the devastating moment he learned of her death. He said, addressing Fuller directly, "You took her from us, and there's no coming back from that." The prosecution painted a harrowing picture of Fuller's controlling behavior, using text messages and witness testimonies to illustrate the toxic dynamics of his relationship with Kaylee. The evidence showed a pattern of possessiveness and anger that culminated in the fatal shooting. In his defense, Fuller's legal team attempted to argue,
"To this family I once shared time and love with. Truthfully, I am sorry about the pain you've all suffered through, but more importantly, the loss of my ex-girlfriend Kaylee that I loved too. But I have to continue to stand innocent because I am. And I hope you all can eventually see in your hearts that I am not the person the media has made me out."
However, the prosecution countered by emphasizing the premeditated nature of the crime, arguing that Fuller had ample opportunity to reconsider his actions but chose not to. Martise Fuller was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, in delivering the sentence, highlighted the calculated nature of Fuller's actions and the irreparable harm caused to Kaylee's family. The judge stated,
"Protecting the public, acknowledging the seriousness of these acts, the court orders that on count 1 you are sentenced to life in prison without eligibility for extended supervision."
For Kaylee's family, the sentencing provided a measure of closure but no solace. "Nothing will bring her back," her mother said. "But we hope this serves as a warning to others about the dangers of toxic relationships and unchecked violence." The case of Martise Fuller sparked broader conversations about the warning signs of abusive relationships among teenagers. Experts emphasized the importance of education and intervention to prevent similar tragedies. Schools and community organizations in Kenosha, the case of Martise Fuller and others reveals the devastating impact of teen violence, from broken families to shattered communities. These cases highlight the importance of addressing underlying issues, such as toxic relationships and untreated mental health struggles, to prevent future tragedies and support vulnerable teens before irreversible harm occurs. If you enjoyed these cases, then let us know your thoughts below, and make sure to watch our next ones, shown on screen.